Timeless Assassin. Author. Raj_Shah_7152. Chapter 1-25. Prologue. Standing atop a cliff, overlooking the endless sea, stood Caliph, the eternal sovereign. As a four-dimensional being, his perception of the universe differed vastly from that of mortals. To him, the waves below, the shifting sky, and even the land itself were nothing but a frozen painting, stretched across time and space, seen all at once. Even the little boy sprinting toward him, arms flailing with excitement, was but a flicker in the river of eternity, a brief attachment that was here for a moment but could easily be gone the next. "Grandpa! Grandpa!" the child called, his laughter bright, unburdened. Caliph turned, his golden eyes softening. "Look, I made a drawing today, of us, in a garden." The boy's excitement was boundless. But in his rush, he tripped. His small frame hit the stone path, and a sharp yelp escaped his lips as his knee scraped against the ground. Caliph chuckled. With a flick of his hand, the winds lifted both the boy and his drawing into his arms. Another gesture, and the wound on the boy's knee vanished, erased as if it had never existed. The boy giggled, clutching onto Caliph's neck, but then, curiosity flickered in his eyes. "Grandpa, do you never get hurt?" Caliph smiled faintly. "No, little one. I exist outside of time. Even if I were ever injured, I would simply correct it." The boy blinked in confusion. "Correct it?" Caliph's golden gaze drifted toward the horizon. He took a moment before explaining, choosing his words carefully so the young child could follow. "Imagine time not as something you move through, but as something that already exists, every moment, every second, all at once. Immortal lives in a single instant, bound by it. But a being like me." He lifted his hand, fingers curling slightly. "If I were to be cut in this moment, I would simply step into another moment. One where I was untouched. To you, it would look like healing, like immortality. But to me, it is simply a small correction." The boy's brows furrowed in thought, his young mind trying to grasp something far beyond human understanding. After a moment, he looked up again, his voice quieter this time. "Not even by a mighty sword." Caliph let out a low chuckle. Instead of answering immediately, he pointed at the drawing still clutched in the boy's hands. "Look at your drawing. If you gave yourself, here in the picture, a mighty sword, do you think that the little you, in this drawing, could cut the real you?" The boy hesitated, glancing down at the crude, childish sketch. A stick figure of himself stood beside an exaggerated version of Caliph, flowers and trees drawn haphazardly around them. His small fingers traced the figure of his drawn self, imagining a sword in its hands. Then he giggled, shaking his head. "No, of course not. It's just a drawing." Caliph's smile returned, ever so slightly. "Exactly. Just as a two-dimensional drawing cannot harm you, a three-dimensional being. A three-dimensional weapon cannot harm me, no matter how well built, for, the blade of a sword is as meaningless to me as ink on paper." The boy's eyes widened in fascination. "Then, gods really can't be killed?" "Not ever." Caliph hesitated. For a moment, the wind stilled. The waves below, once rhythmic and soothing, seemed to slow. The boy had asked an innocent question, but its weight was anything but. After a long pause, Caliph finally exhaled, his voice dropping lower. "Oh, no, plenty have died." Caliph's golden gaze darkened, his thoughts drifting somewhere far beyond the present. "There was a time when even gods feared death." The wind picked up, the once calm waves below thrashing violently against the cliffs. "When the timeless assassin walked between the moments, even gods trembled in their beds at night. He hunted us like prey, with a blade that could sever eternity itself, and even the strongest among us fell before him." The boy's heart pounded in his chest. He had never heard his grandfather speak like this before. But he's gone now, right? Such an evil man, he must have perished, right? He asked, as Caliph let out a deep sigh. "Killed during the great betrayal, 2,000 years ago. And no god has died since." The boy clutched the drawing tighter, but his young mind struggled to grasp the enormity of what he was hearing. The timeless assassin. The great betrayal. For him, it was nothing more than a fantasy story. But to Caliph, it was a scar, one etched into the fabric of reality itself. For a while, Caliph brooded in silence, but soon he turned back to the boy, his expression unreadable. But eternity is long, little one. And history has a way of repeating itself. Let's pray that the past stays buried, because if it rises again, even gods will tremble. When silence reigns and stars grow dim, when gods grow frail and light grows thin, his blood will stir, his kin will rise, with shadowed blade and ageless eyes. From fractured time and shattered glass, will walk the air of what once was. The timeless assassin's whispered breath will break the chains of godless death. No banners raised, no armies sworn. He'll walk alone where light is torn. Yet empires vast will bow and break, as heavens tremble, as kingdoms quake. No throne shall stand, no crown remain, when his descendant walks again. For gods will weep, and time will break, when vengeance stirs and heavens quake. Rattle, rattle. The transport cart shuddered violently, metal grinding against metal as it trundled forward through unseen tracks. Every jolt sent passengers lurching into one another, with the dim overhead light flickering in protest. The air was thick with the sharp stench of blood, sweat, and something chemical. Chains clinked softly in the dark corners, and low, guttural chuckles rose and fell like a distant echo. Thud. Leo's skull slammed against cold steel, and his eyes snapped open as white-hot pain splintered through his head. For a moment, everything was blurred shapes and smeared shadows, the dizziness clinging to him like a heavy fog. His breath hitched. His pulse thundered in his ears, as conscious thought finally returned to his head. Where am I? Leo wondered, as the small flickering coach light briefly illuminated the faces opposite him. Faces laced with twisted grins and sharp teeth bared in something between amusement and hunger. Blades glinted faintly in their hands, smeared with something viscous and dark. Look who finally woke up, a voice rasped, dripping with amusement, as Leo found one of the men in the coach, staring right at him with his tongue out. The man was ghastly pale in complexion, his skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones and hollow eyes that gleamed with faint amusement. A jagged scar ran diagonally across his face, starting just above his brow and disappearing beneath his crooked grin. But it wasn't the scar or the hollow stare that made Leo's breath hitch, it was the horns. Twisted, coiling horns sprouted from the sides of the man's head, curling backward like those of a mountain goat. They were smooth and ridged, faintly glistening under the flickering light. Leo's chest tightened as he instinctively shrank back against the cold steel wall of the cart. Horns. Why does he have horns? His gaze darted across the cramped space, scanning the other passengers, and a chill crept up his spine. The figures around him, 7 of them, hunched, predatory, were not entirely human either. One had grayish-blue skin, its veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. Another had serpentine slits for pupils, flickering over Leo with cold calculation. A third passenger, half hidden in the shadows, let out a low, inhuman hiss from between pointed teeth. Leo's breath came faster now, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm in his chest. Where am I? What is this place? He squeezed his eyes shut, pressing his fingertips against his temples, desperately trying, to remember. How did I get here? What happened before this? But the moment he reached for those answers, a sharp, stinging pain tore through his skull, like shards of glass embedded in his brain. He gasped, clutching his head as a wave of nausea washed over him. The memories remained elusive, hidden behind a fog of agony and confusion. When the pain finally ebbed, Leo was left panting, sweat dotting his brow. His mind was a blank slate, a dark void where his past should have been. Except for one thing, Leo Skyshard. His name. He clung to it like a lifeline, his only tether in the swirling chaos of his fractured mind. Everything else, the cart, the twisted faces around him, the flickering light, it all felt foreign, like he'd stumbled into someone else's nightmare. But this was no dream. It was real. And the fact that it was real, made Leo panic even more. What the hell is going on here? Why are the faces around me not even human? Leo wondered, as he felt something crunching in his left palm. Although he had been clutching onto that object for a while now, Leo only became aware of its existence when he gripped his left palm hard and the papery texture crunched faintly under his fingers. Slowly, cautiously, he unfurled his trembling fingers, revealing a crumpled, yellowed piece of paper smeared with faint streaks of something dark. Its edges were frayed, and the paper felt coarse and brittle, as though it had been handled far too many times before reaching him. With furrowed brows, Leo carefully unfolded it. As jagged, hurried handwriting unfolded before him in smudged black ink. You might not remember this, but your name is Leo Skyshard, and you are one of the best assassins from Earth, not that it matters much here on planet Rodova. Your mission currently is to survive the Academy entrance test. Win, and you will get the answers you seek beyond the gates of the Academy. My only advice for you is trust no one, and that failure to enroll shall mean death. The words were sharp, final, like a death sentence carved into stone. Leo's breath caught in his throat as his eyes lingered on the final line. Failure means death. His hand trembled slightly as he read the note again, his pulse hammering against his ribs. The Academy. A test. Survive. Nothing made sense, and yet, something deep within him, a primal instinct, maybe, screamed that every word on that note was the truth. Survive. His grip on the paper tightened. He didn't know who he was supposed to trust, what kind of test awaited him, or where this academy was, but he knew one thing: he couldn't afford to fail. Taking a steadying breath, Leo began to fold the fragile paper back into a neat square, intending to tuck it somewhere safe. But before he could finish, a sharp hissing sound cut through the low murmurs of the cart. Tssst. A single droplet of thick, glistening liquid flew through the stale air and landed on the corner of the paper. The effect was instantaneous. FWOOSH. Bright orange flames erupted from the point of contact, devouring the paper in seconds. Leo yelped, dropping it as the fire scorched his fingertips. The burning paper fluttered to the grimy floor of the cart, curling in on itself until it was nothing but a heap of blackened ash. Across from him, one of the passengers, a wiry man with hollow cheeks and serpentine eyes, lowered a small glass vial filled with glistening green poison. His lips curled into a smirk as he gave Leo a slow, mocking nod. Careful with secrets, little lamb, the man hissed, his voice slithering between his teeth like smoke. In here, they're more dangerous than blades. Leo's jaw clenched as he stared at the smoldering ashes on the floor. Whatever fragile shred of direction that note had given him was now gone. All that remained were the words, "Survive the test," and the hungry stares of the creatures sharing the cart with him. For a while after the incident, Leo remained silent. His scorched fingertips still tingled from where the burning paper had seared his skin, but he tried not to focus on it too much. Instead, his mind kept repeating one sentence on loop: trust no one. The words from the note echoed relentlessly in his mind, like a hammer striking against glass, each repetition threatening to shatter his fragile composure. His gaze stayed low, his expression unreadable, as if carved from stone. He dared not meet the eyes of the other passengers, nor acknowledge the serpent-eyed man who had flicked the poison onto the note. Instead, he chose to listen. The cart rattled and swayed, metal screeching against metal, but beneath the grinding noise, whispers slithered through the dim space like venomous snakes. Basilisk venom works fastest when it hits the bloodstream directly. A scratch across the throat, and it's over in seconds. Nah, too quick. You want widow's ink. Makes them choke on their own bile. Slow. Painful. A sharp chuckle followed, thin and sharp as a dagger's edge. Across from Leo, a man with yellow, cat-like eyes inspected his blade with an eerie kind of reverence. A thick, oily liquid dripped from its tip, sizzling faintly as it landed on the floor. Waste not, the man muttered, dragging his tongue slowly across the edge of the poisoned dagger, his slit pupils narrowing with pleasure. Leo's stomach churned. They were casual about it, discussing death, suffering, and toxins as if they were recipes in a kitchen. It wasn't just cruelty, it was normalcy to them. His fingers twitched against his thigh. The instinct to act, to do something, gnawed at the edge of his composure. But Leo forced himself still, drawing slow, measured breaths through his nose. Survive. Observe. Wait. Every muscle in his body was taut, like a wire pulled to its breaking point, but his face remained an impassive mask. For now, silence was his shield. The cart continued its violent journey, jostling its passengers, but Leo's focus remained razor-sharp. He wasn't just listening to the conversations, he was cataloging them, the poisons they mentioned, the tones of their voices, the way their hands twitched over their weapons. Somewhere deep in the back of his mind, a faint thought surfaced, a murmur in the foggy void where his memories should have been. He'd heard these conversations before. He'd been surrounded by killers before. But before he could chase that fleeting thread, the cart screeched to a grinding halt, metal screaming in protest. The sudden stillness felt louder than the rattling ever had, as outside, the sound of heavy boots and muffled commands echoed faintly through the thin metal walls. The passengers fell silent, their earlier bravado evaporating into thin air as blades were sheathed and poisons tucked away in one quick motion. Leo's jaw tightened as a single thought pressed into the forefront of his mind: it's starting. Creak. With a slight creaking sound, the door to the cart groaned open, allowing white light to flood in from beyond the door and cast long, sharp shadows against the metal floor. Standing in the doorway was a tall, broad-shouldered man clad in a crisp military-style uniform, its dark fabric adorned with silver insignias that caught the light. His cold, calculating eyes swept over the passengers, scanning each face as if he could see straight into their souls. All 8 alive. Good. His voice was sharp and commanding, carrying an edge that felt like a blade against the skin. At least you're not stupid enough to disregard university rules. Otherwise, I'd have to eliminate you all here. A chilling silence followed, broken only by the faint sound of someone swallowing hard. The man's implication was clear: if one of them had broken the rule against killing during transit, they would all have paid the price. But instead of fear, faint snickers and knowing smirks spread across the passengers' faces, as they disregarded the man and his threat as something light. They began to climb out of the cart, one by one, some with an air of confidence, others with twitchy excitement. Leo was the last to move, his limbs stiff as he adjusted to standing after hours of stillness, but he managed to follow the others, stepping cautiously towards the edge of the cart. But just as he was about to jump down, a rough hand clamped around his waist, stopping him from disembarking, as he was pulled back to his spot. Leo's breath caught in his throat as the uniformed man hoisted him up effortlessly, like a child caught sneaking into a restricted area. "No concealed weapons allowed here, brat," the man growled, his piercing gaze locking onto Leo's wide eyes. "You wear your utility belt over your robes." Leo froze, his mind blank for a moment. Utility belt. His eyes darted down to his waist, and sure enough, tucked beneath the coarse black robe he was wearing, there was a leather utility belt strapped tightly around him. How had he not noticed this earlier? "Sorry, I didn't," Leo stammered, fumbling with the belt as he pulled it free and secured it visibly around his waist. The uniformed man released him with a scoff, stepping back as Leo's gaze dropped to the belt he now wore openly. It was well worn but meticulously maintained, fitted with slots and compartments that housed an arsenal. 12 sleek daggers arranged in symmetrical sheaths. 2 small, round metal orbs that glinted faintly in the light. A couple of glass vials filled with strange, shimmering liquids. Leo's breath caught as his fingers hovered over one of the vials. What were these liquids? What were the orbs? More importantly, why did this belt feel so familiar? He clenched his teeth, shaking off the unease gnawing at the back of his mind. There was no time for questions, not now. "Move along," the uniformed man barked, gesturing sharply towards the others already forming a loose line outside the cart. Leo jumped down from the cart, landing lightly on the dusty ground below. As he adjusted his belt, his sharp eyes caught glimpses of the environment around him: tall metal fences topped with razor wire, watchtowers looming overhead, and distant shadows moving across large floodlit courtyards. Is this a prison? Leo wondered, as the atmosphere certainly felt like one, heavy with anticipation and dread. "Oh man, this year's test is SSSOOO much as fun," the person ahead of him in the queue slurred, their voice dripping with both excitement and nervous energy. Suddenly, the queue leader began to move, prompting everyone behind to shuffle forward in unison. The test was about to begin. Leo advanced with the slow, shuffling line of contestants, his boots gliding silently over the cracked concrete as he moved without making a single sound. It was not something Leo did consciously, but rather a reflexive grace that was born from instinct and years of training rather than thought. The abandoned prison facility stretched out before him, sprawling and oppressive in its decaying grandeur. If Leo had any doubts about being in a prison-like facility at first, they vanished the moment he got a clearer look at the test grounds, as the towering fences, rusted barbed wire, and imposing watchtowers left no room for uncertainty. The courtyard he stood in was vast and rectangular, surrounded on all sides by high concrete walls. Rust stains ran like old blood down the cracks in the walls, and faint scorch marks suggested fires long extinguished. Above, watchtowers loomed at regular intervals, their steel frames skeletal and weatherworn. Dark figures shifted behind tinted glass windows, their silhouettes barely visible. Sniper barrels occasionally caught the light, a chilling reminder of unseen eyes watching their every move. The place felt like a graveyard of authority, stripped of life but heavy with echoes of its brutal past. Leo's sharp eyes flicked over each detail, mapping out the terrain, the choke points, the exits. Instinct drove him to look for high ground, blind spots, and places someone might set an ambush. But before he could gather his thoughts, the sharp blare of a horn shattered the stillness. Blare. Following the sound, every head turned toward the large raised platform dominating the center of the courtyard. Above it, a massive digital countdown clock hung suspended by thick steel cables, its bright red numbers frozen at 2000, glowing like a silent warning. Soon after the horn sounded, a tall man in a crisp military coat stepped forward onto the platform. His dark uniform bore silver insignias, and across his chest, stitched in precise letters, was his title. Commander Rourke, lead instructor of covert tactics and stealth operations. His gray eyes scanned the crowd below with a cold, calculating sharpness, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the courtyard, steady and commanding. Elite assassin seedlings. That's what you are now, nothing more, nothing less. The crowd stood frozen, breaths held, as Rourke's piercing gaze swept over them. You stand here today at the edge of something far greater than yourselves. Beyond this entrance test lies the opportunity to enroll into the Rodova Military Academy, a place reserved only for the finest warriors of the universe. Those of you who survive this test today will join the ranks of history's finest assassins, while the rest will be forgotten. Rourke paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The other departments like swordsmanship and archery have their own trials where no lives are lost. But you, assassins, don't get that luxury. Because such is the life of an assassin. Every step you take, every breath you draw, every shadow you step into could be your last. You are always hanging by a thread, and hence your entrance test is also designed as such. A ripple passed through the crowd, some contestants stiffened while others exchanged wary glances. There are 2,500 of you selected to be here today, just enough to form 1,250 pairs. However, at the end of this test, only 125 pairs will earn the right to step through the academy gates, with your selection being as dependent on your partner's performance as your own. Your partner's death equals your disqualification. Do not mistake this as loyalty or friendship, it is survival. If your partner dies or abandons the test, you fail. Simple. Delivering this grim message, Rourke raised a gloved hand, and two assistants in matching uniforms stepped onto the platform, carrying small black boxes. Each of you will receive 2 devices to aid you in this test. The assistants moved through the crowd, distributing the items. Leo took his turn, accepting the 2 objects and inspecting them. The first device, labeled as counter, felt smooth to touch with a glowing digital display showing the number 1250. The second device, a small, glass-like sphere, was labeled teleportation orb, and it felt cold and fragile in his palm. Just as Leo began to lose interest in the objects in his palm, Rourke's voice rose again. The counter will keep you informed of how many pairs remain. The teleportation orb is your way out, crush it, and you'll be teleported out of the testing grounds immediately. But know this, using it means disqualification, both for you and your partner. Rourke's sharp gaze lingered on the crowd. You now have 20 minutes to find a partner. After that, the test begins. If you fail to pair up, you will face consequences before the first phase even begins. With a sharp motion, Rourke stepped back. Above him, the countdown clock hanging over the stage flickered to life. 2000, 1959, 1958, and as a result the entire courtyard erupted into motion. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Contestants scattered like insects, lunging toward each other, calling out, bargaining, and threatening. Some grabbed the nearest person they could find. Others stalked the crowd, eyes scanning for someone who looked strong, capable, or, at the very least, useful. Fights broke out in isolated pockets as contestants shoved others away from potential partners. Leo remained still, his sharp eyes darting across the crowd, as his instincts screamed at him to choose wisely. A few seconds into the selections, a hulking brute shoved his way past smaller contestants, smirking towards him with bloodshot eyes. However, Leo ignored him outright. His gaze was fixed instead on a slender girl with knives strapped across her chest, but as she made eye contact with Leo, she immediately shirked away, clearly rejecting him tacitly. Leo's thoughts raced. Who could he trust? Who wouldn't turn on him the moment it became convenient? His hand clenched around the counter in one palm and the teleportation orb in the other. 1905, 1904, 1903. The seconds were bleeding away, and each tick of the clock felt like a hammer striking against his skull. Leo gritted his teeth and took a step forward. He had 20 minutes to make a choice that could mean life or death. But as he was about to start choosing, somewhere deep in his chest, the same instinct stirred again, sharp, cold, and familiar. Survive. Trust no one. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The countdown clock ticked relentlessly. 1905, 1904, 1903. However, despite the pressure of choosing a partner fast, Leo stood still amidst the chaos, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd as contestants lunged, bargained, and threatened their way into forming pairs. Almost everyone that Leo looked at seemed mentally deranged to him. Almost everyone he made eye contact with seemed to have the look of a predator first and a person next, which made Leo extremely reluctant to pair with them. However, as he scanned the crowd, his eyes eventually landed on a chubby round-faced contestant, who waddled his way awkwardly through the crowd trying to find a partner. He stuck out like a sore thumb in this crowd of assassins, who were all physically toned and tended to be lean, as while there were a few physically imposing assassins in the crowd, he was the only one that was on the obese side of the scale. Sweat beaded across his flushed cheeks as he shuffled nervously from one group to another, raising his trembling hands in a silent plea for partnership. However, each attempt ended the same way, in a sharp rejection or cold indifference. People turned away, avoided eye contact, or flat out ignored him as if he weren't even there. No way, piggy. Get your snout away from me. Team up with you. Why? To die first. These were the words people used to reject him, but where others saw weakness, Leo saw an anomaly. You are all elite assassin seedlings. The instructor's words echoed in his mind. But it wasn't just that. His thoughts drifted back to the note he'd found in the cart, the one that referred to him as one of Earth's best assassins. And it was these two lines put together that gave birth to an idea in Leo's head. If he was considered as one of Earth's finest, then surely the others here weren't ordinary either. They had to be exceptionally skilled in their own ways. This wasn't a crowd of random misfits. Everyone here had been chosen, selected, vetted. This meant that although the fatty looked chubby and harmless, if he wasn't built for combat, then his skills had to lie in some other department. Perhaps stealth, evasion, or subterfuge. It was a gamble, an educated guess of sorts. However, Leo had a feeling that there was more to the fatty than what met the eye at first glance, and with him unsure of his own combat potential, Leo analyzed that a partner skilled in hiding was his best shot at survival. All right, I want him, Leo thought, as pushing forward through the chaos, he weaved between contestants locked in arguments or hurried negotiations, until he stopped directly in front of the fatty. The boy froze, his round face glistening with sweat as he looked up at Leo, his white eyes brimming with nervousness and suspicion. "Do you have a partner yet?" Leo asked, his voice low and steady. The boy hesitated, his shoulders hunching inward as if bracing for rejection. No," he stammered. "Nobody wants to team up with me." Leo's gaze didn't waver. "I'm not asking what others think of you. I'm asking if you want to survive." For a long moment, the boy stared at Leo. His lips trembled slightly, his eyes flicking downward, then back up. Then, he gave a small, shaky nod. "Why yeah, I do." Leo extended his hand. "Then we're partners." The boy stared at Leo's outstretched hand as if it were an anchor in the middle of a storm. After a heartbeat of hesitation, he reached out and gripped it tightly. His palm was clammy, his grip trembling, but there was resolve in the way he held on, a fragile ember of determination hidden beneath layers of fear. "My name's Felix," he said, his voice quieter now. "Leo." Their hands parted, but the unspoken agreement lingered. Leo studied Felix briefly, his awkward frame, the sweat glistening on his brow, the nervous twitch of his fingers against the edge of his belt. But none of that mattered. Seedlings. One of Earth's best assassins. Leo's instincts told him he'd made the right choice. "He's not here by accident. None of us are," he repeated in his head, as he exhaled softly. The two of them stood side by side as the timer ticked lower. 10 o'clock, 8:30, 5 o'clock. Felix fidgeted slightly, his hands hovering awkwardly near his utility belt that was equipped with an odd combination of only 2 daggers and about 5 giant gourds of liquid. It was undoubtedly an odd combination for any assassin, however, Leo did not read too much into it. "Are you sure about this test? Are you sure about qualification? The others here look so mean and strong," Felix asked hesitantly, his voice low, however Leo didn't turn to look at him. "Quiet. Eyes up. Breathe slow and you'll be fine. The other contestants have already begun to stalk us, they are marking us as easy prey, and your lack of confidence is only making things worse," Leo said, as Felix swallowed hard but straightened slightly, his shoulders less hunched now. Around them, guards in dark uniforms began moving along the edges of the crowd, dragging away the few contestants who had failed to find partners and pairing them forcefully. The clock ticked. 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 0:30, and at 0:10, Commander Rourke's voice thundered across the yard. "Pairing phase is over. If you're still alone, your fate is sealed," the commander said, as under his strict gaze, even the last 2 contestants, unwilling to pair with one another, suddenly straightened up, holding hands happily. The clock reached 0:01, and then froze at 0:00. At that moment a deafening beep echoed across the courtyard, as ahead, the massive steel gates groaned open, their reinforced frames grinding against rusted tracks. The air grew colder, and silence pressed down on all contestants like a suffocating blanket, as from the platform, Commander Rourke's voice rang out one final time. "The time for hesitation is over. The test begins now. We have cast a tracking spell on all your vital signs and shall be watching all your actions through magic crystal orbs. You have 20 minutes to spread out and hide, after which killing shall be permitted. The final 125 pairs remaining will move on, but if even after 48 hours, you people have not reached the elimination threshold, all shall be disqualified. Good luck. Good luck." Rourke's words still hung in the cold air as the steel gates groaned open, their rusted hinges screeching in protest. Immediately, the assembled contestants exploded into motion. Like a dam breaking, they surged forward, scattering into the dark maw of the abandoned prison grounds. Boots pounded against cracked concrete, shadows stretched and flickered under the dim floodlights, as the distant sound of hurried footsteps echoed into the void. Felix flinched as the crowd around him erupted into chaos. His round face already looked nervous and flushed, with beads of sweat prominently glistening on his forehead. "Leo, we should," Felix began, his voice trembling. But Leo wasn't listening. His sharp eyes were already darting across the roof of the crumbling structures, the skeletal watchtowers, and the prison block entrances that yawned like the open jaws of some waiting beast. Up. His instinct screamed at him to climb, to find a vantage point, a predator's perch where he could see everything. In this free-for-all hunt, height meant control. Height meant survival. But then he looked at Felix, whose white eyes flicked nervously across the courtyard. Felix wasn't built for climbing. He wasn't built for fighting either. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Felix's gaze flicked toward the nearest prison block entrance, a gaping corridor shrouded in darkness. Leo hesitated. His grip on his dagger tightened, and then he nodded. "Lead the way." Felix didn't wait. He turned and hurried toward the entrance, his heavy footsteps loud against the cracked tiles, a stark contrast to Leo, who followed, silent and nimble. The two disappeared into the dark corridor and the testing ground gates immediately shut behind them, for they were the last to move. Asterisk 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 asterisk. The air inside the prison corridor was stale and heavy, thick with the scent of rust and decay. For illumination, flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting weak pools of pale light onto the floor, but while it illuminated some patches of the floor, most of the prison interior remained dark and dangerous. Crunch. Broken glass crunched faintly underfoot as Felix led the way deeper inside, his breaths ragged and loud in the oppressive silence. Leo followed close behind, his dagger drawn, eyes scanning every doorway, every shadow, every flicker of movement. After several minutes of silent movement, Felix skidded to a halt at AT Junction, a crossroads of two equally long, empty corridors. He turned back to Leo, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Here. This is good. We can see anyone coming from either side. They can't sneak up on us. Leo's sharp gaze swept over the junction. Two open lines of sight, no corners for ambushers to hide, and enough space to react if someone approached. It wasn't the predator's perch he would have chosen, but it was smart. It was logical. Good choice, Leo said softly, giving Felix a small nod. Felix let out a breath he'd been holding, his shoulders sagging slightly as he leaned against the cold concrete wall. "You cover one passageway, I'll cover the other. If someone approaches from my side, I'll alert you," Felix said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "You just need to hold the fort down for the first hour or two. After that, I'll take care of the rest." Leo raised an eyebrow. "Take care of the rest? What does that mean? Are you planning to transform into an elite fighter after an hour or two?" Felix grinned widely, tapping one of the jugs strapped to his belt with a sense of pride. "Exactly. Sober, I might look like this, but drunk, I'm a menace." Leo stared at him, unblinking. "I'm not weak, Leo. I'm what you'd call a drunk assassin," Felix said, his grin widening. "The more I drink, the stronger I get. It usually takes me an hour or two to really get in the zone, but once I'm there, oh boy, you won't recognize me." For a moment, Leo simply stared at Felix, his expression unreadable. A drunk assassin? What kind of ridiculous assassin was that? Leo wondered, but he kept his skepticism to himself. At the very least, Felix had a plan, and that was better than nothing. Felix leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "What about you? What's your specialty? What clan are you from? The way you move so silently, it's not normal. You had to have been trained by someone elite, right? But I can't figure out who." Leo's body stiffened. His grip on the dagger tightened slightly as his mind clawed at the edges of an answer. Who was his teacher? The question echoed in his mind, but instead of clarity, there was only pain, a sharp, blinding ache that paralyzed his thoughts. He clenched his jaw, his breath catching in his throat. I don't know. I can't remember," Leo said finally, his voice low and tight. Felix's eyes narrowed. His earlier playful tone faded as concern crept into his expression. "What do you mean you don't know? Like, did he wear a mask while training you? Was his identity hidden or something?" Leo shook his head slowly. "No, I can't remember." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The faint hum of flickering lights filled the silence. "Well, it doesn't matter," Felix said, forcing a grin back onto his face, though it was weaker this time. What matters is that you can fight, right? You can handle yourself if someone comes after us, right? Leo hesitated, his sharp eyes locked onto Felix's hopeful gaze. I can try. Felix froze. His smile faltered, and his round face grew pale. A tear welled up in the corner of his eye and slipped down his cheek. You're joking, right? Please tell me you're messing with me. You're strong, aren't you? You were supposed to help me survive. You have mana-based skills or secret techniques, right? You can kill people with your abilities, right? Leo's reply came soft, yet unyielding, no. I don't remember having any skills. Felix's breath hitched as his shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment, he looked utterly defeated. The silence stretched between them, heavier than before. But then, Felix sniffed, rubbed his face roughly with the back of his sleeve, and offered a silent prayer to his ancestors. We are both going to die here. We are going to die like dogs, beautiful dogs, intelligent dogs, he said, as he opened a jar of his alcohol and began chugging at superhuman speeds. We are going to die and my ghost is going to hound you forever. Leo, no skills. In a crowd full of ruthless assassins, you conned me into joining hands with a common man, Felix said, as Leo cracked a wide grin at his words. It was true, right now he was no different than a common man. For the first 30 minutes of the test, no one bothered to step into their corridor. Leo sat crouched near the wall, his dagger resting lightly in his hand as his sharp eyes remained locked on the dimly lit passage stretching before him. He expected an ambush at any second, which made his nerves tense, but the silence here was deep, unnaturally so. Occasionally, faint noises drifted in from nearby corridors, hurried footsteps, muffled screams, the sound of metal clashing against metal. But no one came this way. Felix's choice had been good, better than Leo had anticipated. This corridor was open, exposed, and it was easy to spot someone approaching from either end. It wasn't an ambusher's paradise, nor did it promise any quick kills. Felix is a genius, Leo thought. Predators preferred shadows and hidden corners, which made them instinctively avoid this place, which was like a ramp walk, with illumination on both sides. In his palm, the test counter glowed faintly, with the numbers it displayed continuing to tick down as the minutes passed. 1250 right pointing arrow, 1020 right pointing arrow, 900 right pointing arrow, 850. 800 people, 400 pairs, were eliminated in just 30 minutes. It was a testament to how brutal this entrance test really was, as the deranged killers seemed to be on a full hunt. Sigh. Sitting in silence, Leo let out a deep sigh as he continued to stare at the counter for a long moment before eventually slipping it back into his pocket. Beside him, Felix was sitting cross-legged on the dusty floor, clutching one of his oversized alcohol gourds like a lifeline. His round cheeks glistened with fresh streaks of tears, and his lips trembled as he whispered to himself. Goodbye, Uncle Terence, goodbye, Auntie Magda, goodbye, Sir Swimsalot, you were such a brave fish. Leo's eyebrow twitched slightly, but he said nothing. And goodbye to Gravy the cat, even though you hated me, I still loved you, buddy, Felix sniffled, wiping his nose with the back of his sleeve. Leo risked a glance at him. The boy was staring into space, his lips quivering as though he were giving his final will and testament. And I never even got to finish my cheese platter last night. A tragedy. Truly. A faint chuckle escaped Leo before he caught himself, quickly covering it with a cough. Felix's melodrama was ridiculous, but it made the heavy silence a little easier to bear. He's loud. Too loud. But harmless. Leo returned his attention to the daggers in his hands. They were standard-issue weapons, balanced and sharp, yet they felt familiar, comfortable, like an extension of his arm. Without thinking, his fingers adjusted their grip, and his wrist flicked the blade slightly. The motion was instinctive, effortless. It wasn't something he had to think about, it was something he knew. This feels right. Leo twirled the dagger once, watching the blade catch the pale flicker of the fluorescent lights. I know how to hold this. I know how to use it. But, does that make me a killer? Leo wondered, as he furrowed his brows slightly at the question. The answer should have been simple. But it wasn't. Somewhere deep inside, Leo felt it, a boundary, a line he couldn't imagine himself crossing. He didn't have the same hunger in his chest as the others he'd seen today. If he was a killer, he wasn't one driven by madness or bloodlust. If he was a killer, he sure as hell wasn't one that killed simply for the joy of it. That much he knew, even though he did not have his memories. Thud thud. A faint sound broke his line of thought. It wasn't much, just the faint scrape of boots against the concrete floor, but it was enough. Leo's head snapped up, his sharp eyes narrowing as his senses honed in on the direction of the noise. "Stay quiet," he whispered, barely audible, as his hand shot out to stop Felix mid-meltdown. Felix froze, his wide eyes darting nervously toward the corridor's far end. The faint sound grew louder, more distinct, as two sets of footsteps became evident. Two opponents. Leo gestured towards Felix, without making a sound, as Felix nodded nervously. Soon, shadows flickered against the walls as the approaching figures stepped into the fluorescent light, their voices low but audible. "Are you sure about this passageway?" one of them muttered, his tone laced with unease. He was a tall and wiry-looking dude, with a nasty acid burn running across his jawline. In his hand, he clutched a long, thin blade that gleamed under the flickering lights. The second figure, a stockier man with a thick neck and a mace slung over his shoulder, snorted dismissively at his partner's worry. "Relax. This is the perfect hiding spot. Nobody can ambush us here without alerting us. We can rest and recuperate here for at least an hour before we head back out." The scarred man hesitated, his eyes scanning the corridor. "Still, it's risky. What if someone else is camping at the end, waiting for us to step into their trap?" The stocky man laughed, the sound grating against the oppressive silence. "I've been keeping watch, and I haven't seen a soul step in here for the last 20 minutes. You're paranoid." As they moved closer, Leo pressed himself flat against the wall, his breathing slow and controlled. The dagger in his hand felt twitchy as he leaned ever so slightly to peek around the edge. The two figures were no more than 20 feet away now. Their footsteps echoed faintly, accompanied by the occasional creak of the prison's decaying structure. Leo's gaze traced their movements, analyzing their weapons and stances. The wiry man walked lightly, his blade held at an angle ready for a quick thrust. The stocky one carried himself with the casual confidence of someone who believed he couldn't be outmatched. They were predators, no doubt, but so was Leo. Or at least, he hoped he was. As Leo prepared himself to strike, an unexpected soft, high-pitched yelp escaped from behind him. It was Felix. The sound was barely louder than a breath, but it ricocheted off the corridor walls like a gunshot, and forced the two figures to stop dead in their tracks. The scarred man's eyes narrowed, his blade shifting slightly. "Did you hear that?" The stocky man's grip on his mace tightened as he took a cautious step forward. "Yeah, I heard it." Their gazes snapped toward the darkened corner where Leo and Felix were hidden, their previous casual approach gone. "Who's there?" the stocky man asked in a gruff voice, as Leo silently cursed under his breath. Their greatest strength, the element of surprise, had now been squandered. "Who's there?" Leo's breath hitched at the question, his heart pounding in his chest. The opponents had zeroed in on their hiding spot, all thanks to Felix and his fat ass, which couldn't stay quiet for 30 damn seconds. They were about to walk blindly into the trap, a perfect ambush in the making, until Felix's yelp shattered the silence and turned everything to shit. "What the hell do I do now? Wait and hope they walk into the corner anyway." The thought flashed through Leo's mind, but the answer came almost immediately, sharp and unforgiving. No. Hoping they'd stumble into a trap after hearing Felix's blunder was pure idiocy. They'd already been warned, already had their guard up. Waiting would only give them more time to think, to plan their attack, and that was a luxury Leo couldn't afford. His eyes darted toward Felix, who was uselessly crouched behind a pillar, hyperventilating and looking too paralyzed with fear to do anything, and it was at that moment that it became painfully clear to Leo that Felix wasn't going to be of any help. That he was all alone. "I have to go out. I have to face them head on. There's no other choice." Leo realized, as fear clawed at his chest, a cold, gnawing feeling that made his fingers tighten instinctively around the daggers in his hands. He wasn't sure he could win, not against skilled opponents, not with his fragmented memory and shaky confidence. But waiting wasn't an option. Waiting meant death, and that much he was sure of. Fuck it, Leo concluded, as he stepped out of the shadows, his heart pounding like a war drum, as he looked his opponents in the eyes. Well, the scarred man sneered, his expression one of disgust, as he watched Leo stand before him with 2 daggers in hand. Looks like the little bunny decided to come out and play. Where is your partner bunny? Is he still hiding? The man inquired, but Leo said nothing. His sharp eyes flicked between the 2 opponents, as he tracked their movements, and noted the way they instinctively spread out to flank him. His grip on the daggers tightened, the cool steel grounding him. The stocky man chuckled, his voice low and rumbling. If your partner doesn't show up soon, you're dead meat boy, 2-on-1 and you have no chance. Leo's heart pounded at the threat, his chest tight, but his gaze remained steady. He could feel the fear clawing at the edges of his mind, threatening to paralyze him. Yet, his body betrayed none of it. His stance was firm, his movements measured. Then, the scarred man made the first move, lunging forward with a quick, precise thrust aimed at Leo's chest. But, Leo's instincts took over, and his right dagger shot up to deflect the blow. Steel met steel with a sharp clang, the impact reverberating up Leo's arm. The stocky man followed immediately, swinging his mace in a brutal arc aimed to take Leo's head clean off his shoulders, but Leo ducked low, the weapon whooshing over his head and slamming into the wall behind him, sending cracks spidering through the concrete. For a moment, all Leo could do was defend. His arms moving on their own, blocking and parrying, his feet shifting to keep him just out of reach of their strikes. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, faster with every passing second. But then, something shifted. Time seemed to slow, the chaos of the fight dissolving into sharp, deliberate moments, allowing Leo to perceive everything vividly. The scarred man's shoulder dipped ever so slightly before he attacked, telegraphing his next move, while the stocky man's weight shifted to his back foot before each swing of the mace, giving Leo a split-second warning. They're slow. Everything around me is slow. The realization hit him like a jolt of electricity. He could see everything, the tension in their muscles, the angles of their strikes, the flaws in their footwork. Despite his lack of memory, his body seemed to know exactly what to do. Every attack, every feint created by his opponent felt like it was moving at half speed, giving him more than enough time to react. It was an indescribable feeling. A feeling where he felt fully in control of himself and his surroundings, but he could not understand why. His opponents were clearly not moving slowly on purpose, however, to him they felt slow, like he were fighting children, and this sensation helped him ease his nerves a bit. The scarred man lunged again, this time with a high slash aimed at Leo's neck, but Leo sidestepped, his movements fluid and precise as he flicked his left dagger up to parry the blade. He didn't counter, not yet. He wasn't ready to strike back, not until he had to, but the dodging and parrying felt effortless now. Like he did not have to try hard to stay alive. The stocky man roared, charging forward with his mace raised high, and Leo waited until the last moment, before rolling to the side as the heavy weapon smashed into the ground where he'd just been standing. Dust and debris filled the air, but Leo barely noticed. His focus was razor sharp, every nerve in his body attuned to the fight. The scarred man snarled in frustration, his blade flashing toward Leo's ribs in a quick thrust, but Leo stepped back, pulling his daggers up in a defensive cross, which easily blocked the thrust. Smash! The impact jarred his arms, but he held firm, his gaze narrowing. There's an opening, he realized, his eyes locked on the scarred man's throat. The angle was perfect. A quick strike, clean and precise to the throat, and the fight would be over. It was an opportunity hard to pass, as the instinct to kill surged through him. His grip tightened on the dagger, his muscles coiled like a spring. But then, something in him faltered. The thought of taking a life, even in self-defense, made his chest tighten. He could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, a suffocating pressure that stopped him cold. No. Instead of aiming for the throat, Leo shifted his focus. He feinted high, forcing the scarred man to raise his guard, and in that instant, he struck low. His dagger slicing cleanly through the teleportation crystal strapped to the man's belt. Crash! The scarred man's eyes widened in shock. What the? A brilliant flash of light engulfed him, cutting off his words, as he vanished in an instant, his form dissolving into shimmering particles. The stocky man froze mid-swing, his eyes darting to his own crystal, which flared to life in response. Panic flashing across his face as well. No! Wait! He yelped, but before he could finish, the magic activated. His body flickered, glowing faintly before disappearing in a second burst of light, as the corridor suddenly fell silent. Leo stood there, his breath coming in shallow gasps, his daggers trembling slightly in his hands. The fight was over, but the tension in his chest remained. He stared at the empty space where his opponents had stood, his mind racing. He hadn't killed them. He didn't need to, but sparing them did not feel right either. The bloodlust within him seemed to be unsatisfied with his choice, as for the first time, the look in his eyes shifted. From looking like a sane man in control of his emotions, he transformed into someone utterly deranged, his expression mirroring the bloodlust of the other assassins in the test. Yet, the look of insanity passed as swiftly as it had come, giving way to a composed, measured calm once more. The immediate threat was over. His life was no longer in danger. Leo stood in the middle of the dim corridor, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. His gaze lingered on the spot where his opponents had stood just moments ago, the empty space a stark reminder of what had just happened, as slowly, the reality of his victory began to sink in. Leo tightened his grip on the daggers, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. The fight had been strange. Every movement, every attack, had felt slow, almost deliberate, as if the world around him had been moving at half speed. It wasn't normal. It couldn't be normal. He closed his eyes briefly, focusing on the dull ache in his muscles, the fatigue settling into his limbs. Whatever clarity he'd felt during the battle was gone now, replaced by an exhaustion that made his legs tremble. What was that? He wondered, his jaw tightening. How did I do that? It was as if his body had taken over completely, moving with precision and instinct he couldn't explain. Yet now, standing there in the aftermath, he felt utterly drained, like every ounce of energy had been wrung out of him and every muscle in his body was sore. My body feels wrecked, like I've just woken up after running a marathon the day before, and now every muscle is screaming at me, Leo muttered under his breath while rolling his shoulders, hoping to ease some of the tension, but the added movement only made things worse. The attempt at moving sent a sharp jolt of fatigue through him, as his hands began to tremble uncontrollably. What's happening to me? The thought clawed at his mind, panic rising in his chest. What was that ability I just used? He wondered, as without knowing what ability he used or what were the consequences on his body for using it, Leo felt clueless on how to deal with the aftershocks. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, clutching his trembling hands. Desperation took hold as he interlocked his fingers, squeezing tightly in a futile attempt to steady them. But the tremors refused to stop, his body betraying him even as his mind raced for answers. Whatever this ability is, my current body is clearly not strong enough to use it for long. 20 to 30 seconds, that's my limit as of now, but if I push beyond it, I'm probably going to end up in a coma, Leo realized, as he convoluted on the floor, every muscle in his body spasming and sending waves of pain rolling through his body. For a full minute, he trembled on the floor as if he was undergoing an epileptic shock, a truly painful and pitiful sight to watch. And it wasn't until a full minute passed, that the spasms started to weaken in intensity. Eventually, 3 minutes after the last spasm subsided, Leo finally recovered enough to get back to his feet, but the experience left a bitter taste in his mouth. Whatever pride he previously felt at being able to fight well and hold his ground amongst these stone-cold killers, was replaced by a strong desire to never lift a dagger again, as the aftermath of using his powers was anything but enjoyable. Where the hell is Felix? Leo wondered once his mobility was restored, as the fatty had not shown himself, or offered to help long after the fight was over. "It's calm," a faint voice mumbled from behind the pillar where Leo had last seen Felix, and just as he anticipated, the fatty seemed to still be perched behind that same column, having not moved a single inch since the fight began. Too calm. Does this mean Leo's dead? He must be. He had no skills. Felix mumbled, hugging the gourd in his hand tighter, his body shaking with each shallow breath. He hadn't dared look at the fight, hadn't even glanced to see what was happening. In his mind, the outcome was already clear: there was no way Leo could have survived. Why did I partner with him? Felix groaned softly, rocking slightly as he spoke to himself. I should have teamed up with someone stronger. Someone reliable. Someone who doesn't just die. Felix sniffled, glancing toward the corridor's edge but still too scared to move. Well, at least I'll get a good story out of this. Felix the betrayed, left to fend for himself by a useless partner. A sharp kick to his leg jolted him from his thoughts. Shut up, Leo's voice cut through the air, sharp and firm. Felix yelped, nearly dropping his gourd as he scrambled to his feet. His wide eyes darted to Leo, his mouth falling open in shock. You're alive. Leo raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. Obviously. Felix's gaze flicked past him, scanning the corridor. The two opponents were gone, leaving no sign of their presence other than the faint cracks in the wall where the mace had struck. You took them out. Felix stammered, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. Leo didn't respond immediately. He sheathed one dagger, resting the other lightly against his thigh as he turned to look at Felix. They're gone. Felix's shock quickly turned to excitement, his face lighting up as he stepped closer. But how? You said you didn't remember how to fight. How did you not die? Leo sighed, shaking his head slightly. I don't know. Felix grinned, his mood shifting entirely. Oh, I knew it. You're not useless after all. You've got skills, hidden skills. You're probably some kind of secret badass who forgot how awesome he is. Leo rolled his eyes, brushing past Felix. Calm down. But Felix wasn't listening. This is amazing. We're going to crush this test. With my genius and he gestured vaguely, whatever that was, we're unstoppable. Leo didn't reply. He felt a silent rage bubbling within him, which forced him to contemplate whether or not he should skin Felix alive where he stood, but he decided against it eventually. I need him to survive this test, Leo concluded, as with a deep sigh, he let the matter of Felix's cowardice slide. Drink up, the next fight won't be so easy, Leo said, as slumping against his column, he sat back down in his original hiding spot. Over the next hour, the pace of elimination slowed down significantly. Leo stared at the glowing counter in his hand. The numbers had ticked down relentlessly at first, a blur of constant movement. But now, it crawled. 490 pairs remaining. 489. 488. The drop was agonizingly slow, barely 1 or 2 pairs eliminated every 5 minutes. Compared to the frenzy of the first 30 minutes, when eliminations had been constant, brutal, and swift, it felt like a different test entirely. Leo exhaled, his breath slow and deliberate as he leaned back against the wall. He glanced at the counter again, as if expecting it to speed up, but the numbers remained unchanged. The chaos has settled, he thought, his gaze narrowing. The weak are gone. Now, only the predators remain. It was a sobering realization. Those who had been too slow, too unskilled, or too scared had already been culled. What remained were the best contestants, experienced, calculating, and dangerous. Leo dropped the counter into his lap, his fingers trembling slightly as he flexed his hands. Pain shot through his palm as a result of the strained movement, making him wince sharply. His muscles ached still, even after an hour of rest, as whatever ability he used, seemed to have done a real number on his body. Will this heal in the short time? Leo wondered, as he raised his hand to eye level, watching as he slowly opened and closed his fingers. Each movement sent a fresh wave of discomfort through his arm, a stark reminder of the toll the fight had taken on him. His entire body felt battered, as though he'd been through a gauntlet of punishment. And in a way, he had. Another fight like that, he thought grimly, and I'm not making it out of here. Leo let his hand drop, resting it on his thigh as he leaned his head back against the wall. Exhaustion tugged at him, a persistent weight that dragged his eyelids lower with every passing second. For a brief moment, he considered letting himself sleep. His body screamed for rest, every nerve and muscle begging for relief. But the thought was dismissed just as quickly. I can't afford to. If he let his guard down now, he might not wake up. The pain coursing through his body wasn't just from exhaustion, it was a warning. Whatever ability he'd used during the fight, it had left him broken. If he pushed himself again without recovery, he knew the consequences could be far worse. His eyes flicked to Felix, sitting a few feet away, as he exhaled softly. Felix needs to step up for the next one, he thought, watching his partner's movements carefully, as he sincerely hoped that now that Felix had enough time to get drunk, that the man would finally pull his weight around here. Felix sat slumped against the wall, his oversized gourd cradled in his lap like a lifeline. His flushed cheeks and glassy eyes made it clear, he was drunk. But it wasn't just his appearance that had changed. Felix had become a whirlwind of muttered complaints, exaggerated gestures, and erratic energy that filled the quiet corridor. The difference was like night and day. The same people that he claimed to miss and love previously when he was not drunk, were the people he cursed and complained about now, as Leo felt unsure on what to make of this change. This stupid test, Felix grumbled, kicking a stray pebble weakly across the floor. What kind of sick psychopath puts people in a death game like this? Huh, what are we, gladiators? I didn't sign up for this crap. He took another swig from his gourd, the liquid sloshing noisily as he wiped his mouth with his sleeve. And my parents. Oh, they're to blame for this. Felix, you have potential, they said. Felix, join the academy, they said. It'll make you stronger, they said. Stronger. I've never been more terrified in my entire life. His voice cracked, and he let out a dramatic sigh, his head falling back against the wall. And don't even get me started on my ancestors, he muttered, pointing a shaky finger at the ceiling as though addressing them directly. You're supposed to be watching over me, aren't you? Isn't that your job? Well, you're doing a terrible job. What's the point of ancestral blessings if I'm stuck here, about to be murdered by psychos with swords? He groaned loudly, covering his face with one hand. I swear, if I make it out of here alive, I'm moving to some quiet farm planet. No assassins, no tests, just me, some cows, and a nice, simple life. Felix took another swig from his gourd, pausing only to glare at the empty air in front of him. And don't even think about sending me on another mission, Mom. I'm done. Done. You hear me? He waved the gourd in the air like a flag, his voice rising in volume. I'm gonna live like a king. No more tests. No more. His gaze shifted to Leo, who was watching him silently, his expression unreadable. Felix froze mid-rant, his eyes narrowing as his bravado flared. What? You got a problem? Felix snapped, pushing himself to his feet unsteadily. He jabbed a finger in Leo's direction, his flushed face twisting into an exaggerated scowl. I don't like your judgmental gaze. You think I'm scared? Huh, is that it? Leo raised an eyebrow, leaning back against the wall. I didn't say anything. Yeah, well, you were thinking it, Felix retorted, wobbling slightly as he tried to maintain his stance. You wanna fight? Huh, you want a piece of this fist too? Leo sighed, his exhaustion making it impossible to muster any real annoyance. Felix, sit down. Felix huffed, crossing his arms indignantly but eventually slumping back against the wall. Yeah, whatever. I wasn't serious anyway. You're lucky I don't feel like teaching you a lesson right now. Leo's lips twitched, but he said nothing, his attention already drifting toward the sound of faint footsteps echoing down the corridor. There's someone down here. Another prey to kill, said a feminine voice, as two sets of hurried footsteps suddenly made their way down the corridor. Leo noticed two new opponents walking down the corridor. This time, it was a duo, a broad-shouldered man with mismatched armor and a brutal spiked flail slung over his shoulder, and a woman with piercing green eyes and a set of throwing knives strapped tightly across her chest. Leo recognized her instantly. She was the dangerous one he'd spotted outside the prison during the pair-up phase. The one he briefly considered as a potential partner. Her cold, calculating gaze had stood out to him even then, and now, seeing her up close, he knew she wasn't just dangerous, she was deadly. Their footsteps echoed faintly, their voices low but growing louder as they neared. "I'm telling you, I heard someone mumbling down here," the woman said, her voice sharp and clipped. "Probably just a couple of weaklings hiding in the dark," the man replied with a chuckle. "This'll be over quickly." Leo's jaw tightened. He turned toward Felix, who was still slumped against the wall, half drunk and muttering under his breath. "Felix," Leo hissed, his voice sharp but quiet. "Be quiet. They're coming." But Felix either didn't hear him or didn't care. He muttered louder, something incoherent about how he hated this damn test. "Shut up," Leo snapped, his voice barely above a whisper. But it was too late. The duo stopped in their tracks, their heads snapping toward the source of the sound. "See," the woman said, her lips curling into a smirk. "Told you." The man grinned, hefting his flail in one hand. "Guess we're having some fun after all." Leo's fingers tightened around his daggers. He'd hoped to avoid another fight so soon, especially with his body still aching from the last one. But now, there was no choice. "Great. Looks like it's up to me again," he thought, preparing to step out of the shadows. But before he could move, Felix stood up. Leo froze, staring in shock as Felix staggered to his feet, his face flushed and his expression twisted in drunken fury. "Hey!" Felix bellowed, pointing an unsteady finger at the duo. "Who the hell do you think you are, huh? Coming down our corridor, acting all smug and shit." The woman raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Well, this is unexpected." The man laughed, his deep voice booming. "Look at this little drunk pig. He thinks he's a tough guy." Leo's instinct screamed at him to pull Felix back, to do something, but he hesitated. What the hell is he doing? Can he actually fight? Leo wondered, as he wanted to see what Felix was capable of, but also did not want to be eliminated because of Felix's idiocy. But before he could make a decisive decision, Felix's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "Tough? Oh, you don't know the half of it, you overgrown bitch." He shot back, as even the large man looked surprised at the sudden comeback. Then, to Leo's utter disbelief, Felix charged. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Felix moved with a speed and precision that defied his drunken state. His first target was the man, whose mocking laughter turned into a startled grunt as Felix closed the distance faster than expected. The man swung his flail in a wide arc, but Felix ducked under it effortlessly, his movements erratic yet deliberate. "Too slow, you big bastard," Felix snarled, slamming his short sword into the man's thigh. The man howled in pain, stumbling backward as blood poured from the wound. But Felix didn't stop. He yanked the sword free and stabbed it into the man's shoulder, driving the blade in deep before twisting it viciously. "You like that?" Felix hissed, his voice low and menacing. "How about this?" He pulled the sword out and jammed it into the man's neck, blood spurting in a gruesome arc as the man gurgled and collapsed to the ground. The woman, no longer smirking, threw a knife at Felix with deadly precision. But Felix swayed drunkenly to the side, the blade missing him by inches. "You missed, sweetheart," Felix taunted, his grin feral. "Try again." The woman didn't hesitate. She drew her twin blades and lunged at Felix, her strikes fast and ruthless. But Felix was faster. He parried her first strike with his sword, the clang of steel echoing through the corridor. His other hand shot out, grabbing her wrist and twisting it until she dropped one of her blades with a cry of pain. "You think you're scary?" Felix growled, his voice dripping with venom. "You don't know what scary is." With a savage roar, he slammed her head into the wall, the sickening crack of bone reverberating through the air. Blood streamed down her face, but she wasn't done. She lashed out with her remaining blade, slicing a deep gash across Felix's arm. The wound was gnarly, a brutal tear that sprayed blood across the floor. But Felix barely flinched. "You bitch," he snarled, grabbing her by the throat and slamming her into the ground. She gasped, clawing at his hand as he pinned her down, his sword hovering over her chest. "Beg," Felix whispered, his grin widening. "Beg me to let you live," he demanded, as if deriving some sadistic pleasure by making her feel powerless, but the woman did not play by his rules. "Go to hell," she replied defiantly, her green eyes burning with passion, as her response made Felix's grin fade away. "Wrong answer," Felix said, as with a brutal thrust, he drove the short sword into her chest, twisting it until her body went limp. It was a brutal end for the woman, but thankfully for the man struggling on the floor, his partner's death meant he was teleported out of the test area immediately, where hopefully the medics could try and save his life, despite all the blood he had already lost from his neck. Asterisk 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 asterisk. As the rush of the fight left his body, Felix stood over the pool of blood he had extracted from his opponents, grinning maniacally at his handiwork. His chest heaved as he turned to Leo, his grin widening. "Well," he said, his voice casual. "What do you think? Pretty badass, huh?" Leo stared at him, his mind reeling. The Felix who had cowered behind a pillar during the last fight was gone. This was someone else entirely, someone unhinged, dangerous, and terrifying. "You killed them," Leo said, his voice low. Felix shrugged. "Yeah, what? You think I was gonna let them kill us?" Leo didn't respond. He couldn't. Felix laughed, wiping the blood off his sword with his sleeve. "Don't worry, partner. I've got your back." But as Felix turned away, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at a stranger. Drunk Felix was nothing like the usual cowardly Felix, and although his drunk version was useful in combat, Leo felt it in his bones that he couldn't trust this deranged killer the same way he trusted the coward Felix. The faint glow of the counter caught Leo's attention, its red digits steadily ticking downward. 389 pairs remaining. The number had already fallen below 400, the competition edging closer to its grim conclusion. With only 125 pairs set to qualify, just over 260 more pairs had to be eliminated before the test ended. Leo let out a slow breath, his thoughts swirling as he stared at the glowing device. Do we wait here until the test ends? Keep fighting as we have been? Or, is it time to move? The pool of blood on the floor, still fresh from Felix's earlier rampage, caught Leo's eye. It was a gruesome reminder of what had transpired here, and it made one thing painfully clear: this corridor was compromised. Anyone who walked in now would see the bloodstains, smell the danger, and proceed with caution. This wasn't a hiding spot anymore, it was a trap waiting to be sprung. "Felix," Leo said, his voice low. Felix was leaning against the wall, his face flushed and a gourd of alcohol clutched tightly in his hand. His clothes were splattered with dried blood, his sword hanging loosely at his side. "What?" Felix replied, his voice slurred but brimming with confidence. Leo hesitated before asking, "What's the plan? Do we wait? Move? Hide? We're getting close to the cutoff. We need to think this through." Felix pushed himself off the wall with an exaggerated shrug, his stance unsteady but oddly menacing. "Wait? Hide? Are you kidding me?" he scoffed. "We're not weaklings, Leo. Some skills. We're hunters now. It's time to stop sitting around and start hunting." Leo frowned. "Hunting? You think that's a good idea?" "Of course it is," Felix barked, waving his sword like a conductor directing an orchestra. "Look at this place. You think anyone's dumb enough to walk in here after what I did? This corridor's useless now. We've gotta move. Find new prey. Show this arena who's boss." As much as Leo hated to admit it, Felix wasn't wrong. Their hiding spot was compromised. Staying here meant waiting in vain, or worse, being ambushed by someone smart enough to scout the danger. "All right," Leo said finally, sheathing his daggers. "We move. But we're not wandering aimlessly." Felix tilted his head, smirking. "Oh, got a plan, genius." "We're going up," Leo replied. "I want higher ground. Somewhere we can see what's happening around us. I need to know where our threats are coming from." Felix grinned, his confidence bordering on arrogance. "Fine by me." I'll lead the way, and if anyone's dumb enough to get in our way, I'll handle them before they even reach you. That's fine by me too. I'll back you up if we run into trouble, Leo said evenly. Felix gave him a wink, his grin sharp and feral. You got it, partner. Let's see what this prison arena has to offer. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Leo's desire to move to higher ground was driven purely by instinct. At the start of the test, when he'd been unsure of both his own abilities and Felix's, hiding had seemed like the safest choice. But now, after gaining a vague understanding of what they were capable of, his instincts urged him to seek higher ground. Something about having a vantage point, a place where he could observe and control the situation, felt inherently right, like a reflex buried deep in his bones. However, finding a way to climb higher was easier said than done. Without a map of the prison, locating the right staircase to the terrace felt almost impossible. Most staircases led to storage rooms or ended abruptly in dead ends. The dim lighting only made things worse, casting long, shifting shadows that concealed every corner and kept the threat of lurking enemies ever present. Felix, in his drunken confidence, moved with an unpredictable swagger. His heavy boots echoed against the concrete floor, his muttered insults growing louder with every step. This damn test, Felix growled. Who even thought this crap up? Probably some asshole who's never had to lift a finger in his life. Bet they're up there watching us like we're rats in a maze. Leo said nothing, his eyes scanning their surroundings with sharp focus. Every shadow felt alive, every corner a potential ambush. And the other contestants? Felix continued, laughing loudly. PFF'd. A bunch of wannabes. Did you see that guy with the flail? What a joke. Felix, keep your voice down, Leo said, his tone clipped. We're not the only ones here. Felix snorted, waving him off. Relax, partner. You've got me, remember. No one's gonna mess with us. The sight of a staircase up ahead cut their conversation short. There, Felix said, pointing with his sword. Higher ground, just like you wanted. Leo's gaze shifted to the staircase. Narrow and poorly lit, its rusted metal steps creaked ominously with every movement. He hesitated, his instincts warning him to be cautious. But Felix didn't wait. With a wide grin, he stomped up the steps, his movements loud and careless. Felix, wait, Leo hissed. But Felix was already halfway up, humming a tune to himself as if he hadn't a care in the world. Leo clenched his jaw, suppressing a sigh as he followed, his steps silent and deliberate. The staircase opened onto a wide-open balcony overlooking a large section of the facility. The air was colder here, sharper, and the faint hum of distant fights carried up from below. From this vantage point, Leo could see pairs moving through the corridors below. Some were locked in brutal combat, their cries echoing through the cavernous space, while others skulked in the shadows, their movements deliberate and predatory. Felix leaned over the railing, grinning like a kid in a candy store. Look at them, he said, pointing with his sword. Like ants, scurrying around. They don't even know we're up here. Leo's gaze swept across the area, his sharp eyes noting every detail. A group stalking their prey, a lone figure hiding in the shadows, bloodstains trailing along the floor. It's a good vantage point, Leo admitted quietly. We can see everything from here. Felix laughed. Told you I'd lead us somewhere good. This is perfect. But even as Felix gloated, Leo couldn't shake the unease creeping into his chest. Something about this place felt off. This balcony wasn't the highest point in the prison. The terrace loomed above them, just a few meters higher, its shadow casting an ominous pall over the area. It's not enough, Leo muttered. Felix frowned. What now? Before Leo could answer, his sharp eyes caught a glint of something metallic cutting through the air. It was fast, too fast, and coming straight for them. Move, Leo shouted, his voice sharp and urgent, as he lunged forward and shoved Felix aside with all his strength. The blade screamed through the air, slicing the space where Felix had just been standing. It struck the metal railing with a deafening clang, the impact vibrating through the structure as sparks flew. The weapon quivered, embedded deep in the railing, its edge gleaming under the dim light. A throwing knife, deadly and precise. Leo's heart pounded as his gaze darted toward the direction it had come from, his body tense and ready. The air felt heavier now, charged with a new danger. "We're not alone," Leo whispered, his hand already tightening around the hilt of his dagger, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows for the unseen threat. Felix barely stumbled aside as the spinning blade hurtled toward him, its razor-sharp edge slicing the air where his chest had been moments ago. The blade ricocheted off the metal railing with a clang, before harmlessly falling to the floor below. The sound shattered the fragile calm of the balcony, a warning to everyone nearby of the chaos unfolding. "And there goes our cover, great. We'll have to move again," Leo thought bitterly, his sharp gaze snapping toward the source of the attack. A faint shimmer of movement above the balcony caught his attention. The sound of rustling fabric followed, accompanied by the faint click of boots landing lightly on the metal framework above. Felix, in stark contrast, flailed and gripped his short sword like a lifeline, spinning around aimlessly. "What the hell was that?" he yelped, his voice echoing far louder than it should have as he tried to locate the enemies without any success. "There," Leo hissed, but his warning fell on deaf ears, as Felix continued to spin around like a blind buffoon. "The drunk pig dodged," a woman's voice remarked, calm and cutting, her words laced with a cruel amusement. Before Leo could react, two figures dropped from the shadows, landing onto the balcony from the terrace with eerie grace. The first was a lean man, his sharp features twisted in a smug grin. A glowing chain coiled tightly around his forearm, crackling with arcs of blue lightning that hummed ominously in the air, and beside him stood a woman with piercing red eyes, her twin knives spinning effortlessly in her hands. Leo's eyes narrowed, recognizing the dangerous precision in her movements. Each rotation of her blades promised lethal intent, and their coordinated stances made it clear to him that they were seasoned killers. The man smirked. "I'm Kale," he said, his voice smooth and deliberate. "This is my sister, Vara, and as per tradition of the Felter clan, we are introducing ourselves before we kill our prey." Felter clan. Leo mused, trying to recall if that name meant anything to him, but just like his lost memories, even if he knew anything about the Felter clan, he could recall nothing about them at the moment, forcing him to not dwell on the topic for the moment. "Well, I'm called your father," Felix slurred, stumbling forward with a feral grin, "but you may affectionately call me Daddy as I slit your throat." Kale's grin faltered at Felix's response, as without warning, he lashed out with the glowing chain, the air sizzling as the electrified links snaked toward Felix like a living serpent. Leo's eyes widened as he watched the chain shift mid-arc, curving unnaturally toward Felix's chest. "What the hell is that?" Leo thought, his pulse quickening. The chain defied logic, its movement guided by something beyond physics, as both its unnatural turn and its lightning energy seemed something that simple science could not explain. But Felix, despite his drunken state, swayed just out of reach, the chain cracking against the ground where he'd been standing moments before. "Whoa, that's a cool move. Mind telling me the name of your technique?" Felix inquired, looking impressed by the attack as Kale snorted in response. It's a little family skill called Thunder Serpent," Kale taunted, pulling the chain back with a snap. "It's not something a pig like you could ever dream of mastering." Before Felix could retort, Vara flicked her wrist, sending one of her spinning knives hurtling toward Leo. Instinctively, Leo raised his dagger to block it, but his breath hitched as the single blade suddenly split into three mid-air. Each new blade arced toward a different part of his body, forcing him to twist awkwardly to avoid two and deflect the third. "What the?" Leo muttered, his heart racing as the blades embedded themselves in the wall behind him. Vara smirked, her red eyes gleaming with malice. "Impressed? My knives always find their mark, one way or another." Leo's chest tightened. These weren't ordinary weapons, they were infused with something beyond craftsmanship. His opponents weren't just skilled, they wielded abilities that defied logic, and it left him feeling unmoored. Kale struck again, the chain lashing out with a crack of lightning as Felix stumbled back, avoiding the electrified links by inches, but the sheer force of the strike sent chunks of the concrete balcony railing flying towards him. Smack. One shard struck Felix's cheek, leaving a thin line of blood trailing down his face, as Felix looked genuinely confused by what hit him. Meanwhile, across the balcony, Vara closed the distance to Leo, her twin knives moving in a deadly blur. She slashed and thrust with precision, her attacks forcing Leo on the defensive. At first Leo felt confident facing her, as he tried to parry her attacks to the best of his abilities, knowing full well that the slowing down effect would kick in soon enough. However, when even after fighting for 15 seconds, his special ability failed to kick in, Leo started to panic for his life. Why isn't it happening? Leo thought desperately, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The clarity he'd felt in his first fight, the strange sensation of time slowing, was nowhere to be found this time around. His movements felt sluggish, his reactions barely enough to keep up with Vara's relentless assault. "What's the matter, boy?" Vara taunted, her voice dripping with mockery. "Losing your nerve." Leo gritted his teeth, parrying another flurry of strikes, yet each impact jarred his arms, the fatigue from his earlier fight weighing him down, as he realized that he was becoming progressively slower as the fight raged on. "Fuck me, at this rate I'll die within the next minute if nothing changes. My body has not recovered enough for me to move my limbs this fast. The strain it's putting on my body is immense," Leo thought, as he came to terms with just how bad his position was in this fight. Felix, meanwhile, ducked under another swing of Kale's chain and surged forward with drunken abandon. It was a dangerous move, for if he miscalculated his dash even slightly, the only possible outcome was certain death. However, luckily for him, his timing was perfect. Smack. Smacking the blunt end of his sword straight into Kale's ribs, Felix turned the tide of battle in his favor. Kale staggered, his grin replaced by a grimace of pain. "You'll pay for that," he spat, yanking the chain back for another attack. But Felix didn't give him the chance. With a drunken roar, Felix slammed the pommel of his sword into Kale's gut, forcing the air from his lungs, before slicing clean through his side. Blood poured from the wound as Kale collapsed to his knees, his intestines spilling out as he got disemboweled in the most brutal way possible. "Kale!" Vara's scream echoed across the balcony, her composure breaking as she turned toward her fallen brother, giving Leo the breathing room that he so desperately needed. With a desperate throw, Leo sent his dagger spinning toward her waist, towards where she had secured the teleportation crystal, and much to Leo's joy, his aim held true, shattering the teleportation crystal strapped to her belt. Crunch! The crystal splintered, and a brilliant light engulfed Vara's form as the teleportation magic activated. "No!" Vara screamed, her voice fading as her body dissolved into shimmering particles. Soon after, Kale's crystal also flared to life, pulling him from the fight. However, unfortunately, not before Felix sliced his throat, ending his life. By the time he teleported out, his situation was beyond salvage, almost ensuring that he would be found dead on the other side, leaving only bloodstains and the pungent smell of his guts spilling over in the balcony. Felix grinned, wiping the blood from his blade as looked towards the sky. "Who's your daddy now?" he screamed, alerting even more enemies to their potential location, as Leo barely suppressed his rage. Felix in his drunken state was as much of an asset as he was a liability, and Leo could not figure out how exactly to handle him. "Come on, Felix, we need to move," Leo urged as soon as the fight ended. He wasn't about to linger on the balcony, not after their position had been so thoroughly compromised. "Move." "But we just got here," Felix grumbled, swaying slightly as he wiped the blood off his sword. His tone was equal parts annoyance and drunken disbelief. Leo didn't bother arguing. He grabbed Felix's arm and gave it a firm tug, pulling him away from the balcony and back into the dimly lit prison corridors. Felix stumbled but eventually followed, muttering under his breath about how Leo had no appreciation for hard work, and how he was always rushing into the next disaster. Once inside, the duo continued their search for the staircase to the terrace. However, this time, Leo's mind began to drift. His sharp eyes scanned the darkened hallways out of habit, but his thoughts lingered on the fight that had just ended and how he was only a few seconds away from facing certain death. Why didn't time slow down for me this time? What did I do wrong? Leo wondered, the confidence he had gained from his first fight now slipping away as he grappled with his inability to recreate the same effect. After his initial victory, he had assumed the time-slowing effect was something innate, a natural ability that would activate whenever he entered a fight. But that assumption now seemed naive, even foolish. It was more likely a skill, much like how Vara's ability to split her daggers mid-air was clearly a skill. However, the problem for him was that unlike Vara, Leo had no idea how to trigger his own ability. The knowledge of how to use it, like so much else about himself, remained locked away in the fragments of his missing memories, which made him hesitant of looking for any future trouble. "Hey Felix, you have special skills, right? What can you tell me about them?" Leo asked, hoping to extract some crucial knowledge from his drunk partner. But expecting a coherent answer from Felix felt like asking a monkey to teach calculus. "My special skill is my natural handsomeness. I'm definitely the most handsome man in this test. 100% natural DNA, no funny animal DNA mixing for superior effects. 100% human," Felix declared, grinning smugly. Leo slapped his forehead in frustration, exhaling sharply. This was exactly the level of absurdity he had expected. But as ridiculous as Felix's words sounded, there was something beneath them that piqued Leo's interest, a kernel of information he couldn't ignore. "You're saying the others in this test, the ones with snake-like eyes and horns growing out of their heads, they're genetically modified humans?" Leo asked, narrowing his gaze. Felix stuck out his tongue and blew a spittle-filled raspberry. "Of course not. Not all of them are humans. Some are dwarves, beastmen, elves, half-bloods. But yeah, if they don't have significant body hair and they've got animal-like features, they've definitely spliced their DNA with some animal for enhancements." That piece of knowledge clicked into place in Leo's mind. It seemed that in this world, taking on animal traits through genetic enhancement wasn't just possible, it was common. Thinking back to the individuals on the transport carriage, he now recognized just how prevalent these modifications were. "You know," Felix continued, swaying slightly, "I can still respect the ones who do it to improve as warriors. Like, eagle eyes for long-range vision as an archer, or cat eyes for night vision." "That's smart." Felix's expression darkened, and his voice dropped into a grumble. "But what I can't respect are the men who modify their dicks with pig dicks just to screw women better." Leo blinked, completely caught off guard. "What? One girl I liked got screwed by one of those dirty bastards with a pig dick," Felix went on, his tone growing bitter. "Of course, she was never going to be satisfied with me after that. Mine's a full 2.5 inches, but it's not genetically enhanced like his." Leo felt his face darken, horrified by the sheer depravity Felix was insinuating. If what he said was true, then this world was far more twisted than Leo had initially thought. But on the other hand, women with slimy. "Stop!" Leo shouted, cutting Felix off before he could finish. "Please, just stop." Felix looked offended. "What? Don't tell me you've never fantasized about doing the horizontal monster mash with one of those enhanced kitties. I mean, ooh la la la." He closed his eyes and licked the air, his expression one of degenerate joy. Leo's stomach churned, and he turned away, swallowing back a wave of nausea. "I will probably never forget the face he made today," he thought grimly. "This is going to haunt me for the rest of my life." Thankfully for him, however, by this point the duo had walked enough to find yet another staircase that seemed to be leading towards the terrace, putting an end to their absurd conversation. As Leo stepped onto the prison terrace, his gaze instinctively lifted to the night sky, and what he saw froze him in place. 7 moons. They hung like silent sentinels in the vast, dark expanse above, their pale light barely piercing the oppressive shadows of the night. Each moon was different, some small and faint, others larger and more pronounced, but all seemed to hover at odd angles, their uneven glow casting fractured patches of illumination across the cracked and crumbling terrace. 7. There's supposed to be one moon in the night sky. Just one, Leo thought, the certainty of the fact unsettling him. It was strange. He remembered so little about his past, yet this detail felt significant, almost ingrained in his very being. The sight of 7 moons seemed to mock that certainty, leaving him momentarily disoriented. But despite its otherworldly beauty, there was no comfort to be found in Rodova's alien night. The darkness was cold, heavy, and oppressive, pressing down on him like an invisible weight. Leo's gaze lingered upward for only a fleeting moment before he pulled his focus back to the terrace. Whatever awe he had felt was quickly replaced by unease as he surveyed the barren expanse around him. The terrace stretched wide and empty, offering an unobstructed view of the surrounding prison grounds. It was an excellent spot for spotting potential threats but a terrible place to avoid them. Great for seeing trouble coming. Terrible for avoiding it, Leo thought grimly, his sharp eyes scanning for any sign of danger. There wasn't a single pillar or large concrete block to provide cover. No shadows to conceal them if someone approached. The space was completely exposed, a predator's perch, not a refuge. His grip on his dagger tightened as his unease deepened. After the near-death experience in his last fight, Leo's confidence had waned. The fragility of his abilities had been laid bare, and the realization left him hesitant to engage in any more battles tonight. No more fights, Leo resolved silently. Not unless there's no other choice. Let's just wait this out, he muttered under his breath. No more fights unless we have to. Behind him, Felix let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. He tipped his last gourd of alcohol upside down and shook it desperately. A single drop fell out, landing on the ground with a faint plop. Damn it, Felix cursed, his tone equal parts frustration and resignation. That's it. I'm dry. Leo frowned, his gaze snapping toward Felix. What do you mean, dry? Felix grinned lopsidedly, his cheeks still flushed from the alcohol. Means in about 40 minutes, this drunk genius turns back into a sober idiot. And trust me, you don't want sober Felix in a fight. Leo blinked, momentarily stunned. The fat idiot had started this test with several gourds of alcohol, yet he had managed to drain them all within hours. That's great, Leo muttered sarcastically, his chest tightening as Felix's words sank in. His eyes flicked to the glowing counter strapped to his waist. 219 pairs remaining. We're not even close to the end, Leo realized, unease creeping into his thoughts. With more than 100 pairs still to be eliminated, the test was far from over. He knew that as the final few pairs remained, the hours ahead would only grow longer, more grueling, and infinitely more dangerous. And with Felix's impending uselessness and his own faltering confidence in battle, their chances of survival seemed to dwindle with every passing minute. Yep, no more fights for sure, Leo concluded, his gaze shifting warily toward Felix to ensure the drunk fool didn't do something reckless to give away their position. To his relief, Felix was lying flat on the terrace, gazing lazily at the night sky. For once, he seemed content to stay put, giving Leo the assurance to shift his attention elsewhere, at least for now. With a quiet sigh, Leo turned his focus outward, scanning the chaos below from his vantage point on the terrace. From here, the prison grounds stretched out beneath him like a sprawling battlefield, every corner telling a different story of violence. In some areas, Leo caught glimpses of faint sparks as metal clashed against metal, signaling an intense duel. Elsewhere, he heard guttural grunts and the sickening thud of bodies slamming into walls, revealing the brutal nature of hand-to-hand combat. He absorbed it all, his grip tightening around the test counter strapped to his waist. Kill, kill, eliminate each other faster, he thought, his fingers pressing into the counter's surface as though sheer willpower could make the numbers drop more quickly. Desperation clawed at his chest, each second stretching unbearably. All he wanted was for the chaos to resolve itself, without dragging him into it, and for now it seemed to work. 199 pairs remaining. A few minutes later, the remaining pairs dropped down to 199, officially ushering the qualification round to its final few fights. Just a couple more hours and we will be done, Leo thought, as he prayed for the remaining time to pass as quickly as possible. Half an hour later, time crept forward, the counter slowly ticking down as the number of remaining pairs fell from 199 to 175. Leo sat near the edge of the terrace, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon while his mind wrestled with the growing tension. Each drop in the counter number felt like a small victory, especially with the pace of eliminations having noticeably picked up in the last half hour. 24 pairs in 30 minutes, Leo muttered to himself. That's not bad at all. Behind him, Felix groaned, rubbing his temples as he rolled back and forth on the concrete floor. The swagger and reckless confidence he'd exuded while being drunk had completely evaporated by now, and was replaced by the familiar nervous energy Leo had come to expect from him. My head's killing me, Felix grumbled. Why did I drink so much? Leo glanced over his shoulder, raising an eyebrow. Maybe because you thought being a drunken maniac was better than being your usual cowardly self. Felix shot him a weak glare. Cowardly? That's harsh, man. I'm not cowardly. I'm cautious. Sure, Leo replied dryly, turning his attention back to the horizon. A sober Felix was of absolutely no use in battle, and Leo knew it. For the next hour or two, if trouble came their way, it would be up to him alone to handle it. Hey, Leo, Felix started, his voice tinged with guilt. What do you want me to do, man? I can help keep watch too. Where should I look? Leo sighed, gesturing toward the staircase they'd used to reach the terrace. Keep an eye on the stairway. And if there's any sign of trouble, run. Felix groaned as he dragged himself across the ground, clutching his head while muttering something unintelligible under his breath. Still, he settled into the spot Leo had indicated and began his watch, though Leo wasn't entirely confident in how effective he'd be. Regardless, having Felix keep watch on the stairway gave him some peace of mind, as at least for now, it seemed like they were safe. Can I handle another fight? Leo wondered silently, the answer feeling far more complicated than he expected. Like any other human, he was hardwired with an instinct for self-preservation, a natural fear of death embedded deep in his brain. But while the thought of dying filled him with unease, it wasn't the fight itself that scared him. Oddly enough, when he pictured himself being stabbed or wounded, the fear was muted, almost distant. It paled in comparison to the visceral dread he felt at the mere thought of drowning, an irrational fear that lingered at the edge of his awareness. Why does that scare me more than being brutally stabbed? He questioned, the unsettling thought sending a faint shiver down his spine. Somehow, it felt as though his body had already endured countless injuries, so many that the fear of receiving new ones no longer fazed him. Yet, with no memory of when or how those injuries might have occurred, Leo found himself once again unable to answer the questions that gnawed at his curiosity. Stumble. Just then, Leo picked up the faint sound of someone coming up the stairs. As looking across to the stairway, he immediately spotted Felix flailing his arms wildly to catch his attention. Get away from there, Leo lipped without uttering a sound as Felix pulled away as per his instructions. Seconds later, a female figure stumbled onto the terrace, her body lurching forward as if every step were a monumental effort. Blood trickled from a deep gash on her side, staining her torn tunic and leaving a faint trail behind her. She was badly injured, her breaths coming in short gasps as she seemed to be desperately looking for safety. However, unfortunately for her, the terrace was not the safe spot she hoped for it to be, as the moment she stumbled onto the terrace, her eyes landed on Leo and Felix as her heart sank. No, not now. Not here, she thought, dread gripping her chest like a vice. For a moment, her knees threatened to buckle. The sight of two figures already stationed on the terrace, two potential enemies who could end her life in an instant, sent her spiraling further into despair, as she froze cold. At this moment, her instinct screamed at her to retreat. But there was nowhere to go. No cover to hide behind. No time to plan. All she could do was hope for mercy, as she tightened the grip on her dagger. Don't, she mumbled weakly as she pointed her dagger towards both Felix and Leo, only for a fresh gush of blood to burst out of her side, forcing her to fall to her knees and tend to her injury once more. They're going to kill me, the woman thought, her pulse pounding in her ears. However, as the seconds passed and neither Leo nor Felix moved to incapacitate her, a small flicker of hope began to burn in her heart. As she looked at her opponents again, she began to notice the details she had missed at first, the way Felix's oversized frame gave him the appearance of a lumbering pig, and how Leo's eyes held an unsettling innocence, as if they had never claimed a life before. At that moment, she realized that her opponents, much like her, had come to the terrace to hide and not kill, and that she could potentially survive, if only she tricked them into thinking that she was surrendering. Clank. Decisively dropping her weapons to the ground with a metallic clatter, she raised her trembling hands into the air. "Please, spare me," she rasped, her voice sounding hoarse and strained. Leo didn't respond immediately, his eyes narrowing as he assessed her. Felix, however, flinched at her plea, his grip tightening on his sword. "I'm not a threat," she cried out, her voice cracking. "I swear, I just needed somewhere safe. Please, don't kill me." Leo's gaze didn't waver. His voice was calm but cold when he finally spoke. "Where's your partner?" The woman's shoulders sagged, and tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. "We got separated," she admitted. "We were being chased by someone stronger, too strong. He told me to run while he stayed behind to hold them off. I don't know if he's even still alive." Her gaze flicked nervously between the two men. Felix's wide-eyed stare wasn't exactly comforting, but it was Leo's measured calm that scared her more. "He's the leader," she realized. "The one I need to convince." She shifted slightly, wincing as her wound flared with pain. "I'll leave if you want me to," she added quickly, desperation lacing her tone. "Just, let me live. That's all I'm asking. Just, let me live," the woman rasped, her voice trembling as her hands remained raised in surrender. She looked at Leo pleadingly, her tear-streaked face bloodied and pale, conveying a true picture of desperation. But despite her convincing act, Leo wasn't sold on her performance. Sizing her up, he remained poised for combat while his mind swirled with suspicion. Something about her plea gnawed at him, setting off every alarm in his head. Her words were too measured, her movements too calculated. She was a vixen, a conniving liar if Leo had ever seen one, and although he couldn't recall if he'd encountered someone like her before, something within him assured him she was not to be trusted. Should I let her leave? He wondered momentarily, only for a voice deep within him to stir, a cold, primal whisper that said, "Trust no one." It wasn't the first time this voice had surfaced during the test, and over time, Leo had learned one thing about it: the voice was never wrong. He tightened his grip on his dagger, his body growing even more tense. If she was desperate, then she was dangerous, for desperation often made people lie, cheat, and kill without hesitation. "If you want to live," Leo finally said, his tone steady and devoid of emotion, "slowly take out your teleportation crystal and crush it. You'll be teleported out of the competition, alive." The woman blinked, her breath hitching as though she hadn't expected this response. It was a clever offer. If she truly didn't have her partner by her side and only wanted to leave the prison terrace alive, crushing the teleportation crystal was the fastest and simplest way out. However, the reluctance on her face to do so gave Leo all the assurance he needed to confirm that leaving the test wasn't her true intention. She was likely hoping to find her partner after escaping, planning to regroup and return stronger. She had no intention of abandoning the entrance test just yet. Leo observed her body language carefully, noting how her shoulders sagged and her body slumped at his offer, as though the weight of his demand had drained her remaining strength. However, instead of protesting, she cunningly agreed, acting as though his proposal made absolute sense. Okay, she said softly, nodding as she moved her trembling hand toward her tunic pocket. Even though it appeared she was ready to comply, Leo didn't relax. His sharp eyes stayed locked on her every move, watching the deliberate slowness of her hand like a hawk. It was at this moment that he caught the faint flicker in her eyes, a flicker that betrayed her true intentions. She's stalling. The realization struck him like a vice. His knuckles whitened around the hilt of his dagger as his instinct screamed louder. Her hesitation, her subtle glances, these weren't the actions of someone defeated. She was calculating, looking for an opening. Eventually, she drew out the teleportation crystal and held it up as though ready to follow his instructions. But just as her fingers seemed to tighten around it, a soft smile played on her lips, and she mouthed the words, "Dark fog." In an instant, darkness exploded around her, a swirling fog that engulfed the terrace within seconds. The air grew dense, thick shadows coiling around her like living tendrils and blotting out all sight. Leo staggered back, his dagger raised high and his heart pounding. "Felix," he barked, his voice cutting through the unnatural haze. "Stay alert. What the hell is this?" Felix responded, his panicked voice echoing from a distance, his tone laced with fear. He stumbled backward, the fog closing in, choking his vision as it grew denser. The woman's lips curled into a smirk as she moved soundlessly through the fog. Her pulse thundered in her ears, her breath shallow and ragged. She had one chance left, one desperate move to turn the tide in her favor. "I only have enough mana for one skill, this dark fog. I have to make it count," she thought as she tightened her grip on her blade. "The fat one. He's the weak link. Take him out, and the other one crumbles." Her body burned with pain, her wound screaming with every step she took, but she continued to push forward, driving herself onward with sheer willpower. With a burst of speed, she dashed toward Felix, her blade poised for a final, desperate strike. But before she could reach him, a sharp, searing pain shot through her back. Her eyes widened in shock as her body went rigid. Thud! She collapsed, paralyzed from the waist down, as she felt the sharp sensation of a dagger embedded firmly in her spine. But how? Just how did he hit me through the fog? She wondered, her mind blanking from the pain as a shriek escaped her lips. She was certain her dark fog skill had effectively blocked Leo's vision, making it impossible for him to pinpoint her location. But she had underestimated him. Suspicious of her from the start, Leo had closely followed her gaze and body language, anticipating her intentions before she even made her move on Felix. Even through the fog, Leo had a rough idea of where she might be and hurled a couple of daggers in that direction, with the second one finding its mark in her spine. If he was in the woman's position, he too would have chosen to target Felix in hopes of survival, and it was that same logic that helped him take her down now. The dark fog created by the woman dissipated quickly after she was incapacitated, revealing the terrace in its entirety once again. Leo's sharp eyes immediately locked onto his opponent, who lay sprawled on the cracked concrete, writhing in pain. Her face twisted in agony, and her trembling hands clutched at the dagger embedded in her spine. She desperately tried to yank it out of her body, but the angle at which it was lodged made it impossible for her arms to muster the necessary strength. "Aghhh!" she screamed, her howls echoing across the terrace and grating on Leo's nerves. A flash of irritation crossed his face as the urge to end her life immediately swelled within him. But before he could act on it, a faint glimmer caught his attention. Her teleportation crystal. During her fall, the crystal had slipped from her grip and rolled a few feet away, just out of reach. That detail shifted the dynamic entirely. She was no longer a threat, she was at his mercy now. "Please, please don't kill me," she sobbed, her voice hoarse and trembling, her wide, terror-filled eyes darting between Leo and Felix. Leo stood unmoving, his expression unreadable as his gaze flicked toward Felix. Without speaking, he gestured toward the crystal with a nod. "Stomp it," he said coldly. Felix hesitated, his face pale and his movements uncertain. The shock of the woman's earlier attack still clung to him, and the weight of her pleading made him hesitate further. But Leo's tone left no room for negotiation. "Do it," he barked, the command snapping Felix out of his stupor. Swallowing hard, Felix shuffled toward the crystal. He cast one last nervous glance at the woman, who was still begging for her life, before raising his boot and slamming it down onto the glowing gem. Crunch! The crystal shattered beneath the force, releasing a bright, blinding light that momentarily engulfed the terrace. The woman's screams were abruptly cut off as her body dissolved into shimmering particles, vanishing from sight in an instant. And just like that, the duo had eliminated yet another opponent. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the faint sound of Felix's ragged breathing. He stood frozen, staring at the spot where the woman had been moments earlier. "She came at me so fast," Felix muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, his wide eyes betraying his discomfort. Leo, however, said nothing. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, his knuckles whitening as his grip tightened around the dagger in his hand. Once again, he had chosen to spare an opponent's life by destroying their teleportation crystal. And once again, the act left a sour taste in his mouth. Why did I spare her? He wondered, grinding his teeth as unease churned in his chest. Would she have spared me? The answer was clear, she wouldn't have. If their positions had been reversed, she would have cut him down without hesitation. Yet, despite knowing this, he had shown her mercy. Was it a conscious attempt to be different from the killers around him? To prove to himself that he wasn't like them? Or was it simply a naive act of weakness that could one day get him killed? Sparing those who wouldn't spare me, that's not mercy. That's stupidity, he thought bitterly. Logic told him that mercy had no place in a trial like this, for only naive, idealistic fools clung to such notions in a place designed to reward ruthlessness. But as much as he wanted to believe that he wasn't like the others here, something deep within him rebelled against the idea. Every time he spared someone, his body reacted with a physical sense of discomfort, as though the decision itself was unnatural. Am I really any different from the others? Or am I just another murderer pretending to be something I'm not? The question lingered, heavy and unwelcome, as Leo clenched his jaw and forced the thoughts aside. I can't afford to second-guess myself. Not here. Not now. For now, the immediate threat had been dealt with, and that was what mattered most. Back to your position, Leo ordered tersely, breaking the tense silence. Felix blinked, his trance broken. Why yeah, sure, he stammered, shuffling back toward the staircase with unsteady steps. Leo returned to his spot near the edge of the terrace, his sharp eyes scanning the dark horizon for any signs of movement. Despite the woman's screams and the commotion of their fight, Leo resolved to remain on the terrace for the remainder of this final phase. As instead of a proper fight, the woman's screams seemed like a one-sided torture that could potentially warn off other competitors from approaching the terrace. It was a gamble, but so was moving once more, so late into the test, and Leo did not wish to take such a risk. 151 pairs remaining. The end was drawing near, and with every tick of the counter, it edged closer. But until it arrived, Leo and Felix had to remain on high alert, for the trial wasn't over just yet. Leo's gamble to stay on the terrace paid off. For the last half hour of the test, nobody dared to set foot on the terrace, giving Leo and Felix a free ride to qualification. Whether it was due to fear, fatigue, or simply the fact that most of the remaining contestants were too preoccupied with their own fights, the terrace remained undisturbed. 125 pairs remaining. As soon as the number on the counter hit 125, a loud horn blared across the prison grounds, marking the end of the brutal qualification test. Leo's heart skipped a beat at the sound of the horn, the sudden loud noise startling him. However, once the initial shock faded, relief quickly flooded through him, a heavy weight lifting from his chest. He had made it. He had survived. I actually survived, he thought, the realization settling over him like a soothing balm. But as relief gave way to reflection, another thought surfaced, the question of, what now? Leo's gaze dropped to the counter strapped to his waist, its red digits now frozen at 125. The number signified his success, his progress. But beyond that, it offered no answers. Do I finally get the answers I've been searching for? About this place? About myself? He wondered, but before he could delve deeper into the subject, his thoughts were interrupted by an excited shriek. We did it. We actually did it, Leo. Felix cried, his voice brimming with unrestrained joy. Before Leo could react, Felix charged toward him, arms outstretched for an exuberant hug. No, no, we are not at the hug stage yet, Leo rejected, trying to prevent Felix from hugging him, but the fatty seemed undeterred. He kept charging towards Leo despite Leo's protest, only for the teleportation crystal to flare into life at the last second, teleporting both of them out of the prison terrace in an instant. Asterisk 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 asterisk. When the glow of the teleportation crystal subsided, Leo found himself standing in a strange, sterile room, with Felix being beside him a few feet away. The confusion arising from sudden teleportation seemed to have stopped him from following through on the hug plan, as he folded his arms and studied the new surroundings he found himself in cautiously. The new space was enormous, a vast sea of white tiles, each marked with a single black circle in its center. As Felix scanned the room, he managed to count 125 tiles in total, each one housing a pair of contestants, all of whom seemed equally as confused as him at the sudden teleportation. "What the hell is this place?" Felix muttered, while rubbing his temples. "Why's everyone just standing around? What's going on?" Leo didn't answer immediately, his focus fixed on their surroundings. The room was unnervingly empty, no visible exits, no obvious indicators of what was to come. Just the stark whiteness and the oppressive weight of uncertainty. "Leo," Felix pressed, his voice louder this time, tinged with worry. "What are we supposed to do now?" he asked again, but before Leo could respond, a sharp click echoed from above, followed by a mechanical hiss. Leo snapped his head upward just in time to see transparent glass sheets descending from the ceiling. The sound was haunting, a low, rhythmic thud-thud-thud as each sheet slid into place with precise, unnerving efficiency. Click, clunk. The glass panels locked into the ground, forming perfectly sealed cubes around each pair, isolating them from one another. The faint reverberations of the glass settling traveled through the floor, sending a chill up Leo's spine. "What the?" Felix yelped, his hands pressing against the glass wall now enclosing them. He tapped on it nervously, his voice rising in panic. "Leo, what is this? Why are we in a damn box?" Leo remained silent, his jaw tightening as he observed the grid of glass cells around them. The faint reflections of the other contestants' confused faces mirrored their own unease. "Bees." At that moment, a sudden burst of static cut through the tension, followed by a voice booming from hidden speakers. "Congratulations to all contestants for making it this far," the deep, authoritative tone announced, silencing the room. The voice was unmistakable, it was Major Silver Page. The first stage was designed to assess how you function as a team. Whether you could protect a weak target, or collaborate with a strong ally. But teamwork will only take you so far. The Major's words carried a chilling weight, his tone both measured and merciless. The second stage will determine if you have what it takes to become an assassin. Leo's stomach clenched as the words hung in the air, a sense of dread creeping over him. He had thought that the entrance test was already over, but apparently it was not. The Academy accepts only 125 individuals each calendar year, the Major continued. And we are not about to break that tradition now. Out of the 125 pairs standing before me, only one candidate from each pair will be permitted to enroll. The other 125 must lose their lives. A collective gasp rippled through the room, muffled by the glass walls, while Felix stumbled back from the pain, his face pale as a sheet. "This can't be happening," Felix muttered, his voice cracking. "They're not serious, are they?" Leo said nothing, his attention fixed on the Major's voice as it continued. "This is a fight to the death," the Major declared, his tone cold and unyielding. "You have 25 minutes. Fail to win, and both candidates in a pair will be disqualified. Win, and you will earn a chance to become one of the universe's finest assassins." Static crackled once again as the Major's voice disappeared, leaving only the oppressive silence of the room behind. Felix turned to Leo, his hands trembling. "Leo, what do we do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But Leo didn't answer. His sharp gaze remained locked on the dagger in his hand, his mind already racing through the grim reality they faced. The Major's announcement caused a storm of complex emotions to rise within Leo. He did not wish to kill Felix, not after everything they had endured together over the past few hours. But the rules of the second round were brutally clear. Out of each pair, only one could move forward, while the other had to die. There was no room for compromise, no option for mercy. As Leo stood in the pristine, glass-walled enclosure, his hand gripping the dagger at his side, the echoes of violence all around him only heightened his unease. Many of the other pairs had already begun fighting without hesitation. The sounds of metal clashing, Anguished screams, and frenzied shouting reverberated through the sterile room, a grim reminder of what was expected of him. But Leo didn't move. Something about attacking Felix felt innately wrong to him. Although he hadn't known Felix for long, and while he wouldn't go so far as to call him a friend, Felix was not his enemy. He was a man who had stood beside him in chaos, and killing him felt like betrayal. "We don't have to do this, you know," Felix said suddenly, his voice trembling as he backed toward the far wall of the enclosure. His eyes darted nervously around, but his focus always returned to Leo. "We can just wait. Let the timer run out. Both of us get disqualified, but at least we'll still be alive. Doesn't that sound better than killing each other?" Leo didn't answer. He lowered his gaze to the dagger in his hand, its edge gleaming under the artificial lights. His expression was hollow, his thoughts swirling. The Academy's rules were absolute, but Felix's suggestion brought an unwelcome question to the forefront of Leo's mind. Would they really let us walk away if we don't fight? Or would they just kill us both? The thought gnawed at him, burrowing deeper with each passing second. He couldn't shake the sense that the Academy's ruthlessness extended far beyond what they'd already experienced. And that they could easily break their word and kill them both instead of letting them walk off. But even more troubling than that was another, far more personal question. If I don't fight, if I don't win, will I ever get my memories back? The letter he had received before all of this had been clear. His only path to reclaiming his past lay within the Academy. Walking away would mean abandoning the only chance he had to uncover who he truly was. The weight of that realization pressed down on him like a physical force, and his grip on the dagger tightened even more. Conflicting emotions warred within him: doubt, guilt, fear, and his hollow expression turned further dazed. However, just when he found himself buried within a deep pool of indecision, a cold, primal voice whispered in the depths of his consciousness. Kill. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even an urge. It was a truth, raw and undeniable. To survive, to move forward, he would have to kill. The timer on the wall ticked steadily downward, each passing second feeling like a countdown to the inevitable. Felix, growing more desperate with Leo's silence, took a tentative step forward, his hands raised as if to placate him. "Say something, damn it. You're scaring me," Felix blurted out, his voice cracking under the weight of his panic, as Leo finally lifted his gaze to meet him. "In 20 seconds, I'm going to attack you, Felix," Leo said in a cold, emotionless voice. His tone sounding steady and even. Felix's mouth fell open in shock, but Leo continued without pause. "I don't particularly want you dead. But I'm not going to hold back, so I suggest you try your best to kill me too." The words landed like a hammer blow. They were devoid of malice, but that only made them hit harder. Felix stumbled back, his breathing ragged. "What?" he croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can't, you know I can't fight without my alcohol, man. This isn't a fair fight. Please, don't do this." Felix's voice grew louder, more frantic, as tears began streaming down his face. "I'll do anything, Leo. Anything. Just don't kill me." But Leo's expression didn't change. His resolve was unshaken, his focus elsewhere. He adjusted his grip on the dagger, shifting his stance slightly as his body tensed. Felix's voice cracked, the raw desperation in his words spilling out like a dam breaking. "We survived together, man. We were a team. How can you just throw that away?" Leo didn't respond. He didn't flinch. His mind was consumed by the single, undeniable truth. This was the only way forward. "Time's up," he said quietly, his voice cutting through Felix's sobs like a blade. And then he moved. Leo lunged forward, his dagger aimed directly at Felix's chest. Felix screamed, his eyes wide with terror as he scrambled to defend himself. His arms flailed uselessly, the tears in his eyes blurring his vision and his movements clumsy, incoordinated. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Leo's cold and unyielding, Felix's filled with panic and betrayal. And in that instant, the fragile bond they had shared as partners shattered completely. As Felix looked into Leo's eyes now, he no longer saw the kind teammate who had picked him out of a crowd of ruthless assassins, but instead saw a murderer, hell-bent on ending his life. Stab. Slash. The fight was over before it ever began, as Leo slit his throat and stabbed his heart in the most painless way he knew. "Forgive me for this, big guy, I did not wish for it to end this way," Leo said, as those were the last words that Felix heard before his eyes went dark forever. Leo's heart throbbed violently in his chest as he waited for the wave of guilt to wash over him, but it never came. After brutally murdering his teammate, Leo had expected to feel ashamed, even disgusted by his actions, but instead, a strange sense of satisfaction settled over him. "What's wrong with me? What sort of monster am I?" The thoughts circled in his mind as he stared at the blood smeared across his arms in confusion. "Did your companionship mean nothing to me?" Leo wondered, looking at the dead body of Felix at his feet. Yet no matter how hard he tried to summon some remorse, he couldn't find any. There wasn't even a flicker of regret within him. Only a hollow void where his humanity should have been. "Yep, I'm a stone-cold killer. As bad, if not even worse than the others here. Maybe I do belong in this place," Leo muttered lightly, as despite losing his memories, he felt assured of his identity as a killer after this incident. He instinctively knew where exactly to target a man to pierce their heart, and also knew the precise method to slit one's throat to cause one minimal pain, but instant death. These were moves deep-seated in his bones, and the ease with which he performed them told him all he needed to know about himself. He was an assassin, a merchant of death. I did give him a chance to fight back. I gave him 20 seconds and charged from the front. As far as I am concerned, everything from that point onwards was fair, Leo mouthed, as he realized the reasoning behind why he felt no remorse. Introspecting, he felt as if by giving Felix the warning before he came at him, Leo had absolved himself of all blame. Whatever came next was simply fate, and if Felix had the spine to fight back, he could have perhaps survived. It wasn't Leo's fault that he was such a coward while sober, and hence he could not carry the burden of his death on his shoulders. "Monster. Leo Skyshard, you're a monster. But it's okay, at least you are not a dirty monster," Leo concluded, as he sat cross-legged beside Felix's body, waiting for the second round of tests to end. Asterisk 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 asterisk. 18 minutes later. 18 minutes later, as the timer on the wall turned to 0, all the glass wall restrictions were lifted simultaneously. A section of the pristine white walls of the room shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden door through which medics flooded into the room. Healers worked swiftly, casting spells and applying potions to stabilize the victors, their practiced hands moving with urgency. Meanwhile, the defeated were carried away on stretchers, their lifeless bodies treated with a cold efficiency as they were tossed onto loading racks like sacks of potatoes. Leo remained seated on his tile, watching the scene unfold with a detached gaze, until a kind-looking healer approached him, holding out a vial of shimmering green liquid. "For your stamina," the healer said, his tone brisk and kind, as Leo accepted the potion without a word. Pop. Uncorking the potion, Leo took a cautious sip, the liquid burning his tongue and throat slightly as it made way down to his stomach. Delicious, he thought, as the potion worked its magic instantly. A wave of warmth coursed through his body, pushing back the fatigue that had settled deep in his bones. However, just as he tilted the vial to drink more, the sound of heavy boots clicking against the tiled floor drew his attention. The medics around him straightened, their movements slowing as the major entered the room, flanked by a small group of military personnel. The major's entry instantly drew everyone's attention, as the survivors worried whether or not there was a secret round 3 waiting for them at the end of the major's speech. Fortunately though, it did not seem to be the case, for the major began his speech by congratulating all for finally making it into the academy. "Congratulations," the major said, his voice sharp and unwavering. "You've proven your worth. Out of the hundreds of thousands who applied, you are the 125 individuals who have earned the right to join our prestigious assassin wing of the Rodova Military Academy. You've endured trials that tested your strength, your instincts, and your resolve. You've made sacrifices, some harder than others. But let me make one thing clear, this was only the beginning. The major said, his tone sounding congratulatory, but also ominous. Outside this chamber, the major continued, gesturing toward the newly revealed exit door. Transport ships are waiting to take each of you to the academy grounds. There, you will receive your student identification badges and the official academy robes. These are not just ceremonial garments, they mark you as a part of the elite. The mention of robes and badges elicited a few murmurs among the survivors, but most remained quiet, too drained to do much more than listen. The major's gaze swept across the room, landing briefly on Leo and then moving on. Tomorrow, the aptitude testing and orientation will begin. Every one of you is expected to attend, dressed in your academy robes and nothing else. Failure to comply will result in immediate expulsion. Leo's brow furrowed slightly at the last statement. He had not even officially entered the academy and yet there were threats of expulsion already being made. Even now, there seemed to be no room for error. Once the major left the room, Leo briskly rose to his feet and made his way toward the exit. Unlike many of the others still receiving medical treatment, he required little medical attention. The potion he had been given had already done its job, restoring his stamina and dulling the lingering aches in his muscles. Stepping through the doorway, he entered a long corridor where a series of temporary counters had been set up. Behind each one, military officers sat with an air of rigid efficiency, their expressions unreadable as they processed the new recruits. A few students had already formed lines at the counters, some moving sluggishly from exhaustion, while others carried themselves with tense awareness, still wary despite the ordeal being over. The hum of quiet conversation filled the space, but no one dared to speak too loudly. Leo scanned the area and made his way toward an unoccupied counter, where a middle-aged officer with graying hair sat with a thick ledger in front of him. The man barely looked up as Leo approached. "Name?" the officer asked, his tone brisk and to the point. "Leo," Leo responded without hesitation. The officer ran his finger down the list of names, stopping when he found what he was looking for. With a short nod, he reached beneath the counter and pulled out a neatly arranged tray. Leo's eyes immediately flicked to its contents. At the top of the tray were two folded sets of military-issue uniforms. The fabric was durable, the stitching precise, with the rank of private emblazoned on the chest. Unlike the familiar green camouflage patterns he would have expected from military attire, these uniforms bore a distinct gray camouflage design, a muted color scheme clearly meant for blending into urban environments rather than dense forests. His gaze trailed across the insignia above the breast pocket. Stitched in bold letters over the academy's crest were the words, "Assassin Branch." Leo's fingers hovered over the material for a moment, then shifted to the second set of attire in the tray. It was different from the first, jet black, lightweight, and flowing. A set of robes specifically designed for assassin combat practice. "Standard issue uniform," the officer explained in a monotonous voice. "To be worn daily for academic sessions. The black ones are combat robes for practical courses. Use them as instructed." Leo gave a slight nod, picking up the last item in the tray, a small but finely crafted identity token. It was a badge of solid metal, surprisingly heavy for its size. Engraved across its polished surface were the words, "Leo Skyshard, Rodova Military Academy." Although Leo did not yet fully understand the significance of this token, something told him it would be more than just a student identification. In a world where strength dictated status, having proof of his place in the academy would likely open doors he had yet to even consider. For now, however, he simply took what was given, nodding silently as he stepped away from the counter, his mind already shifting to what lay ahead. Walking briskly, he reached the hangar area where modern transport ships were waiting to taxi students to their new home. Once enough students for a trip gathered, they quickly loaded them onto the ship, flying off to the fabled Rodova Military Academy. Asterisk 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 asterisk. The aerial trip to the academy was a short one, lasting barely 15 minutes. However, the distance covered was undoubtedly significant. Leo was certain he had watched them cross an entire ocean based on the view outside his window. From above, the stark contrast between where he had been and where he was headed became increasingly clear. The prison test area had been a secluded island, surrounded by nothing but dense jungles and unrelenting wilderness. Isolated and forgotten, its only purpose was to serve as a battleground for those desperate enough to seek entry into the academy. But the actual Rodova Military Academy was nothing like that. As the ship neared its destination, the rugged, untamed greenery of the island gave way to the sprawling heart of civilization. A vast metropolis stretched in all directions, with towering skyscrapers casting long shadows over the bustling streets below. Massive digital billboards flickered with advertisements, displaying faces Leo didn't recognize, famous influencers, celebrities, and warriors, each plastered with bold text promoting cosmetic products, genetic enhancements, weapons, or military services. The roads were packed with sleek, high-speed vehicles weaving between buildings of varying sizes. Some rolled on the roads below, while others flew haphazardly in the sky, just like the flying capsule he was in. Leo, despite his usual indifference, found himself captivated by the view. The sunrise behind the city's skyline bathed the entire city in a brilliant glow, setting the streets ablaze with hues of crimson and gold. For a moment, he simply observed, appreciating the surreal beauty of it all. Then, his eyes landed on the true centerpiece of the city, Rodova Military Academy. Even in a metropolis filled with architectural marvels, the academy stood out as a titan among them. It was colossal, a fortress in every sense of the word. Its sheer size dwarfed every surrounding structure, making even the tallest skyscrapers look insignificant in comparison. Massive walls surrounded the academy grounds, lined with turrets, security checkpoints, and watchtowers manned by heavily armed personnel. The buildings within the compound were monolithic, constructed with reinforced metal and cutting-edge materials that reflected a sense of absolute power. Leo knew little about urban planning or real estate, but even he understood what this meant. In a city as packed as this one, to have an academy this large in the heart of it meant that the real estate of the academy alone was worth a fortune. No ordinary academy could afford such luxury, and if the Rodova Military Academy stood at such a location, then it was bound to be a special place. Rodova Military Academy, Planet Rodova. The transport capsule carrying Leo descended smoothly, its thrusters emitting a low hum as it approached the academy grounds. With practiced precision, the vessel touched down, sending a faint tremor through the floor beneath Leo's feet. A mechanical chime followed, signaling the completion of the landing sequence. A moment later, the capsule doors released with a pressurized hiss, sliding open to reveal the world beyond. A rush of crisp air filtered in, carrying with it the cold of the environment. Leo took a steady breath before stepping forward. As he exited, the first thing that caught his attention was the sheer scale of the open grounds around him. From the air, he could discern that the Rodova Military Academy was built like a fort, and was massive in size. However, it was only after landing that he realized just how massive it really was. The training grounds stretched around him for as far as the eye could see, and although they felt vast and wide, they looked tiny in comparison to the academy walls that towered at a massive 150 feet in height. The walls of the academy were made from reddish-black bricks, and from the top of the walls hung massive black banners, each one adorned with bold, silver lettering that read, Rodova Military Academy. The banners swayed gently in the wind, their thick, reinforced fabric giving them an imposing presence rather than a decorative one. They weren't made of any ordinary cloth, and even from a distance, Leo could tell that they were crafted from durable, high-quality material, resistant to both the elements and time itself. The silver lettering on the banners gleamed under the morning sun, giving any onlooker the chills. The environment of the academy screamed that this wasn't just a place of learning. It was a legacy. And as Leo looked around, even he felt intimidated by the place's vibes and history. A subtle chill ran down his spine, not from fear, but from the realization of what he had stepped into. This academy was not just a school. It was a proving ground. And only those worthy could graduate from this place at the end. Freshmen, this way. A sharp, authoritative voice cut through the morning air as a female military instructor stood at the front of the gathered recruits. Her posture was rigid, her expression unreadable as she gestured for the new students to follow. Clutching his newly issued academy robes, uniform, and identity token, Leo fell in line with the others, his anxious eyes surveying the surroundings as he looked for any signal from his mysterious letter issuer that could give him a clue on how to regain his memories now that he was inside the academy. Unfortunately, however, there was no external contact made yet, forcing him to follow the others as normal. The instructor wasted no time. As they passed various buildings, she spoke in clipped, efficient sentences, giving a rapid rundown of the academy's key facilities. "This is the administration office," she stated, nodding toward a sleek, modern building lined with reinforced windows. "If you have any issues in your first few days, housing problems, uniform replacements, or paperwork, handle it here. However, don't expect handholding. This is a military institution, not a daycare." Leo barely spared the office more than a glance, noting its location in case he needed anything. The group marched further along a paved road, their boots clacking against the stone as the instructor gestured toward a large, open structure with a domed ceiling. "This is the orientation hall. You will all report here tomorrow at exactly 7 o'clock hours. Sharp. In uniform. If you're late, you may as well turn around and walk off campus, because you won't be setting foot in the testing hall." Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority, and though she didn't raise her tone, the underlying threat in her words was crystal clear. Leo took note. No margin for error. Noted. They moved past another large building, this one distinctly different from the rest, wider, lower, and filled with the tantalizing scent of food. "Mess hall," the instructor said plainly. 3 meals a day. The schedule is posted inside. If you miss a meal, that's your problem. Leo caught a few recruits casting longing glances toward the building. He supposed some of them hadn't eaten in a while. He himself didn't feel particularly hungry, though he knew he'd have to refuel soon. They continued deeper into the academy grounds, passing rows of identical dormitory buildings, each clearly designated for different student years. "These are the third-year dorms. Don't disturb them, for they are the pride of this academy." Quote. They moved further. "These are the second-year dorms. Steer clear of here unless you want to be bullied." Finally, they reached the last row of buildings, positioned slightly apart from the others. "These," the instructor said, stopping in her tracks, "are the first-year dormitories, where you lot will be staying." She turned to face them, arms crossed over her chest. "Find your names on the soft board by the entrance. It will list your assigned rooms. Don't bother complaining about your placements. They've been decided already." Some recruits exchanged wary glances. Then, as if sensing their concerns, the instructor added, "And before any of you ask, no, you will not be sharing rooms. Assassins live in private lodgings. We don't want you killing each other in your sleep." Leo's brow twitched slightly at the bluntness of her statement, but he supposed it made sense. "So be glad you'll all be living separately, enjoying private bathrooms, as individuals from the other professions will not enjoy this luxury and will be forced to share bathrooms with sweaty roommates," she finished, her cold gaze sweeping across the recruits. "If you have any last questions, I suggest you figure them out yourselves." Dismissed. And with that, she turned on her heel and strode off, leaving the new students to their own devices. However, as she passed Leo, she purposefully slowed, just for a fraction of a second, barely enough to be noticed. Her sharp gaze flickered toward him, as the duo made the briefest of eye contact before she continued walking as if nothing had happened. Leo barely had time to process it before he felt something foreign pressed against his palm, a light but unmistakable texture, coarse yet flexible. Paper. His fingers curled around it instinctively before anyone else could notice. His eyes widening in surprise. The instructor did not look back. She walked away without another word, leaving Leo standing among his peers with a silent mystery now resting in his grasp. How did she even slip me the note? I'm sure she didn't so much as touch me, Leo thought, his eyes widening in surprise. The realization unsettled him. He had been hyper-aware of his surroundings, trained to notice even the smallest details, and yet, the note had appeared in his hand undetected. His mind retraced the exchange. The instructor's sharp gaze lingering on him for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary, the deliberate way she had walked past without breaking stride. But no matter how hard he tried to recall, he couldn't pinpoint any obvious movement, no subtle shift or sleight of hand that could explain it. Yet, somehow, she had planted the note on him without his knowledge. She's skilled, Leo admitted, suppressing a frown. If she could slip something into his palm this easily, she could just as effortlessly have planted a dagger between his ribs. A chill ran through him. I'm too weak. The thought sat heavy in his chest. For all his instincts and reflexes, he had been completely outmaneuvered. Who was she? He tried to recall her name but failed. She had never introduced herself, nor had he managed to glimpse her name tag. Yet, her appearance was etched into his memory with perfect clarity. She was tall for a woman, at least 5 feet 10, with an athletic frame sculpted from years of combat training. Her jet black hair was cut just above her shoulders, neatly tucked behind her ears. High cheekbones and a sharp jawline gave her a striking, almost severe look, while her light olive skin was smooth and unblemished, unusual, considering the brutal nature of military life. There was nothing overly distinctive about her, no visible scars, no features that immediately stood out. And yet, something about her presence made her impossible to ignore. Leo exhaled sharply, pushing the thoughts aside. If she's an instructor here, I'll see her again soon enough. For now, it was best to focus on what was in front of him. A quick glance around showed the other recruits already preoccupied with finding their rooms, too absorbed in their own concerns to notice him lingering. Realizing he had been standing still for too long, Leo turned toward the soft board displaying the dormitory assignments and scanned the list quickly. Leo Skyshard, room 316. Memorizing the number, he turned away and made his way toward his room. His fingers curled slightly around the note in his palm. As soon as he was alone, he planned to finally read it. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Dormitory 316. The first-year housing within the Rodova Military Academy was simple yet elegant. There was no excess luxury, no unnecessary embellishments, just an efficient, well-designed space meant to accommodate students without distractions. As Leo stepped inside, the door slid shut behind him with a soft click. The room was spacious enough for a single occupant, neither too large nor too cramped. The walls were a muted gray, the flooring sleek and well-polished, reflecting the Academy's minimalist, military design. Against the far wall sat a sturdy bed, neatly made with crisp black sheets and a firm mattress. Adjacent to it was a small but functional desk, its surface bare except for a built-in terminal, likely meant for accessing Academy resources and coursework. To the left, a tall wardrobe stood, its doors slightly ajar to reveal space for the storage of Academy-issued uniforms and personal belongings. A separate compartment seemed designated for weapons storage, reinforcing the reality that this was not a typical school dormitory. At the back of the room, a private bathroom was tucked neatly into the layout. A quick glance inside revealed a sleek shower, a simple sink, and a mirror mounted above it, efficient and to the point, just like everything else in the Academy. Leo set his belongings down on the desk and exhaled slowly. The tension from the day's trials still lingered in his muscles, but now, for the first time, he was truly alone. His gaze shifted to the note still clutched in his palm, as without wasting another second, he pulled out the small piece of paper, unfolded it, and began to read. First of all, congratulations on making it into the Rodova Military Academy. I am certain that the entrance test was no easy feat, especially considering how you have forgotten most of your abilities. Leo's frown deepened. He didn't care for flattery. Whoever had written this letter knew exactly what had happened to him, knew that his memory loss wasn't natural, but intentional. And yet, they spoke as though it were some minor inconvenience. The words felt hollow, calculated. However, I had faith that you would pull through, for you are what one could describe as a generational talent. Leo exhaled sharply through his nose. He hated this type of praise, the kind that felt more like manipulation than admiration. Generational talent. That meant nothing to him. If he truly was such a prodigy, then why had he felt so lost in the entrance test? Why did every fight leave him doubting his own instincts? The letter continued, and as his eyes moved down the page, his discomfort only grew. Tomorrow, you will undergo aptitude testing, during which your background will be assessed. It is then that you will come to appreciate the loss of your memory. Leo's grip on the paper tightened slightly. So, his past was something dangerous. Something that couldn't withstand scrutiny. Memorize the symbol I have drawn at the bottom of this note and present it to the instructor at the appropriate time. Do not ask questions. Just do it. His gaze flicked to the bottom of the page. A symbol was etched there, intricate yet unfamiliar. It resembled an interwoven set of geometric lines, forming a crest-like emblem. Leo felt no good vibes from this. Every instinct told him that whoever wrote this was toying with him, feeding him just enough information to keep him on a leash. I know you are eager to regain your memories, but now is not the correct time for you to recall them. Your memories will be returned to you when the time is right. For now, your focus should be on performing well within the academy. Leo's jaw clenched as anger slowly bubbled up inside him. His fingers curled, the edges of the note crinkling under his grip. Someone was controlling him, deciding what he could and couldn't know, dangling his own past in front of him like bait. He hated it, and yet, he knew he had no other choice but to comply with the manipulator's whims for now. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.